From Kern Government Television, welcome to this week's Kern County Board of Supervisors meeting, originating from the County Administrative Center located at 1115 Truxtun Avenue, Bakersfield, California. Kern County's vision is to create and maintain a customer-centered county government designed to garner the confidence, support, and trust of the people we serve. Today's Kern County Board of Supervisors meeting will convene momentarily.
Supervisor Gleason?
Here.
Supervisor Scribner? Here. Supervisor Maggard?
Here.
Supervisor Couch?
Here.
Supervisor Perez?
Here.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And before we begin today, I'm going to ask for a report on actions taken in closed sessions from Mark Nations, our County Counsel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Board of Supervisors did meet in closed session in item 33 pertaining to labor negotiations, but there was no reportable action taken. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nations. Earlier at the morning session, I announced that Don Maven, my predecessor on the board, 2nd District Supervisor from 2003 to 2010, passed away after a tough fight against a very aggressive ailment. And I wanted to ask if county staff could lower all of the flags on county buildings to half-mast during his funeral service, which right now is tentatively scheduled for the end of next week, but we'll watch for that date to be firmed up. But Supervisor Maben was a tremendous advocate for the 2nd District, served the 2nd District well, and was also formerly a sheriff deputy and also a Marine. So he served our community and our country, and I would appreciate if we would be able to honor him in that way. So thank you. Next item on our agenda is going to be our consent agenda, and all items listed with a CA or a CA above the item are considered to be routine and non-controversial by county staff. Consent items will be considered first and may be approved by one motion. If a member of the audience wishes to comment or ask questions regarding an item or items on the consent agenda, they may do so prior to a vote being taken on the consent agenda. A member of the board may remove any item from the consent agenda and it will be considered in listed sequence with an opportunity for any member of the public to address the board concerning the item before action is taken. And so we do have agendas available on the back tables by the exits if you would like to follow along. But beginning on page 2, items 3 and 5 are on consent. On page 3, items 6 through 9 are on consent. On page 4, all items 10 through 13 are on consent. And on page 6, items 16 through 18 are on consent. And on page 7, items 19 through 21 are on consent. And on page 8, items 23 through 29 are on consent. And finally, on page 9, items 31 through 37 are all on consent. So are there any members of the audience who would like to make comment on the consent agenda, any of the items on the agenda? Please come forward.
Good afternoon, board members. My name is Gustavo Aguirre, and I'm with Center on Race, Poverty, and Environment. And I want to make comments on items 11, mainly 11, but also 12. Just to thank all of you for the efforts of moving forward with especially on the 11, moving forward with the sidewalks in Lamont, which a lot of residents walk the streets before and after applying for the grant. We have a member here that his health is not the best, but he was making the effort of walking those streets to see improvements in his community. So thank you so much for moving forward on that. And also, I see that 12 is also close to Lamont and looks like it's fixing the streets that were damaged by the flooding. Thank you so much for also taking care of that in the community. And also thanking different agencies of the county with Mr. Murphy, meeting with Murphy on general plan, with Mr. Pope on the flooding, Yolanda Alcantar, that she was key in securing these monies for the sidewalks in Lamont. She's great, great people to work with. Mr. Ryan, the CEO, also meeting with us, Brett with Parks and Recs, Mr. Gleason, thank you for going up and meeting with Lytle Avenue residents. We really appreciate that. And we are looking forward to keep that collaboration. That's the intent of residents that we work with. How can we identify those funds and move forward? And I think my colleague with Leadership Council, she's going to share some funds that may be available to identify other kind of projects like this. But thank you for moving forward. And also on October 25th, we will have our Communities United Action Team for Building Healthy Communities. Supervisor Perez, and you are more than welcome to come. It's at 5 p.m. in David Head Center. And actually, all of the residents that come in prior meetings are part of this action team. So we hope that you make time and join us up there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on the consent agenda?
Hello, my name is Jose. My name is Jose Mireles, Mireles. I just want to thank every one of you for working with the community of Lamar. We just want to make it a better place to live. As you can see, my health is not that good anymore. So I really want to appreciate you guys, all of the supervisors, for putting the sidewalks. And I hope we can do more for Lamont. That's all I want. And Leticia, we invite you to Lamont on October 25th for our meeting, so we can discuss more of what we really want to do for Lamont. You know, we appreciate everything you guys are doing. Now, I was thinking that Lamont was always forgotten, but now I think that it's not. We appreciate it, and we hope that you show up for the meeting. Thank you all for everything, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on the consent agenda?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Patricia Leal, and I work with Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. In the same consent number agendas, 11 and 12, I just want to appreciate the collaboration with the different agencies as we move forward, moving different projects. In regards to the flooding issue, there are currently state funds available through the Strategic Growth Council Sustainable Communities, Sustainable Transportation Plan. So I'll go ahead and forward that information to Craig Pope and Yolanda Alcantar. But this is just a reflection of how, when we work together with community organizations, with community residents, and with different county agencies, and hopefully having our district Board of Supervisors in our meetings and scheduling meetings with us, we're more successful in regards to making sure that those state dollars do come to Kern County, to the areas that we are currently working on. So I'll go ahead and forward that information, and then just following up, I would like again to reiterate, Leticia Perez, that we can have a meeting with you, or if you plan to attend our meeting on October 25th, would greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, I'll read.
I'm not too familiar with this whole process.
Okay, come forward, we'll help you through it.
I apologize. I'm not too familiar with this process, so I'm not sure if I'm supposed to speak at this point or not.
Okay, what was the item you're interested in?
Mental health.
Okay, what's the item number?
You know, I don't know, to tell you the truth. I don't even know if it's on the item. I was told that you have an open forum.
Well, we do have a public comment period that
Yes.
will be coming up soon, and you have 2 minutes to speak during the public comment
That's
period.
the one I want. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so seeing no other comments on the consent agenda, I'll return to the board and ask if any board members have an item they'd like to remove. Otherwise, entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
You have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved, all ayes.
Okay. Thank you. Now we'll return to page 2 of our agenda, item number 1, public presentations. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons to address the board on any matter not on this agenda, but under the jurisdiction of the board. Board members may respond briefly to statements made or questions posed. They may ask a question for clarification, make a referral to staff for factual information, or request staff to report back to the board at a later meeting. So at this time, I'll ask if there's any members of the audience that would like to make a public presentation. Please state your name and observe our 2-minute time limit. Please come forward, ma'am. This is the time. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. All right. Thank you, first of all, board members, sirs, and madam, for your service to our community and for the time you have graciously given me to hear, listen, and comprehend my petition. I speak with regard to the increase in pay for the dedicated staff in the mental health sector of our community.
Would you state your name, please, for the record?
My name is Ana Ortiz via my mother, Perez via my father.
Thank you.
I heard from some of the staff today, just today actually, so forgive me if I don't have this thing memorized, that they haven't received an increase in pay in approximately 10 plus years. A man or woman should be paid a fair wage for the work that they do. A wise king said that you all may know him. He covers your seal and he's between your flag. I haven't had a speech class in a while, so sorry. Anyway, I think that it would help, the service they provide helps in the long run to decrease crime, truancy, and healthcare costs. And if it's done right by dedicated staff that are educated, bachelor's and master's degrees is what they have to have. So they should be getting paid a fair wage for their service. They then empower us, the mentally ill, they empower us and enable us to then become, productive, citizens and contribute back to our community in a positive way instead of the negative way. And, basically, I just urge you to heed and address this issue urgently and favorably. I ask that you use wisdom and weigh this on the scales that there may be balance in our community. And this is just for fun. So let it be written, so let it be done. From the 10 Commandments, you guys might know it. The movie, anyway. Thank you.
Thank you.
God bless you.
I'm going to ask Mr. Alsop, that matter is in regards to labor negotiations with the Service Employees International Union. So if you could briefly inform the public what the status is. We're currently in negotiations, et cetera.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good afternoon. We are in negotiations with SEIU 521. These are negotiations that happen, I think, annually, but we're midway through those, and I would like to tell the woman who just addressed you that we are aware that of the challenges that we have compensating members of that bargaining unit in addition to members of the many other bargaining units that we deal with. I can tell you just for the record that we haven't stopped providing increases to employees altogether. Employees here at the county have, when they're hired, they have 5 steps that they are promoted up through, essentially. And each of those steps is an additional 5% in income every single step. And for the most part, there are very, very few instances people that are hired on are promoted through those 5 steps with 5% increases in pay every single year. So it's a 5-year, 5% every single year. The problem that we're having is that we have not provided a COLA or cost of living increase for some time. And we have a good majority, I would say, of our SEIU membership who are through those 5 steps and topped out and are continuing to work in the position they are topped out, but have not been given a cost of living increase in some time. And that's a problem. And we've identified it, and we are doing what we can to deal with it in light of our budget situation, which is a big, big challenge at the moment. But we are busily trying to find a way forward on that, and that's something I'm not only communicating to you, but also to all of our employees with SEIU 521 who may be listening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and the public as well. Mr. Fox, please proceed, but state your name for the record.
Yeah, Chairman, members of the board, and Dennis Fox. Last week I gave you a cartoon and discussed the difference between farmers in the north and farmers here. I hope you read the Sunday Californian. They finally had something worth reading in it. It was an ad by the farmers in the Delta. And it was a half page and very interesting. It said the same thing. That's why it's wise, if it agrees with me. But seriously, we're supposed to be a conservative area. Well, I think we're so conservative, I'm thinking about 1776. We should come up to that. 1776, a book came out called Wealth of Nations, talked about free enterprise. And previously we were under mercantilism, where tea was brought from India to here and heavily taxed, as people remember. And there the money went to England and took over some cotton, and then they made it, and then it went back to India, which was really a good system if you were the king and they'd like having this money shipped out to you like ours here. And I think maybe also in 76, some other guys agree with that. And they decided they didn't want to be a part of England and that sort of system. So I was thinking, coming up, we're going to end up with a heavily subsidized system coming up in a couple of weeks. And while Bakersfield can be in 3 subsidies is different. But it's going to be paying for tunnels. And these tunnels are the Lawyers Full Employment Act, because we'll be paying for stuff and we ain't going to get the water. Currently, the farmers don't get the water that we're supposed to be paying on the contract for the aqueduct because they got the subsidy. They're going to do the same thing over again. That is my point. Not against them. I'm trying to save them, you know, and drag them kicking and screaming into the 20th or 18th and 19th centuries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. Do we have any other speakers, please? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move on to board member announcements and reports. Okay, seeing none, then we'll move on to our next item on the agenda, which is item number 4. This is an item under the Planning and Natural Resources Department. This is a request for determination of public convenience or necessity for the issuance of an off-sale beer and wine package store type 20 liquor license located at 4950 Allen Road, Bakersfield. And I will turn to Craig Murphy, who is, you are division chief, is that correct? Or
That is correct.
Okay, division chief for the planning department. Good afternoon. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, as you stated, the request before your board today is a determination of public convenience or necessity for the issuance of an off-sale beer and wine liquor license. This is better known as a Type 20 permit, as described by the California Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control. The applicant is Venus Cam Inc., and the project site itself is a Chevron convenience market which is located on the southeast corner of Allen Road and Noriega Road in the Rosedale area. Right now, the site is currently under construction. The request is located within the boundaries of Census Tract 3804. Within this tract, there are currently 2 active alcohol licenses. The first is the Gaslight Melodrama and Music Hall. This is a Type 41 permit, which allows for the on-sale consumption of beer and wine. It's located just under a mile away. And the second is a Rite Aid. This is a Type 21 permit, which allows for the off-sale general package store license. That permit is located 1.35 miles away, and it was approved by your board in December of 1998. Based on the population of this census tract, ABC has indicated that a total of 14 off-sale licenses within Tract 3804 could be permitted. The census tract itself is primarily characterized by residential subdivisions with scattered industrial and agricultural properties. To the north, located within the city of Bakersfield, are residential subdivisions. To the east, also located within the city of Bakersfield, are residential subdivisions. To the west, you have the Kern, Mosquito, and Vector Control District and other heavy industrial designated land. And to the south, you have commercial and rural residential designated land with a mini storage facility and a few rural residences. The proposed Chevron Convenience Market is expected to open within the next couple of months. It will be open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The proposed sales include packaged snacks, beverages, and other various items typical of a convenience market. The applicant has stated that a Type 20 license would provide a great public convenience to all the patrons in the area. As currently approved, the commercial area in which this project is located will include the proposed gas station, a Subway restaurant, and 3 general retail buildings, of which the specific stores have not yet been identified. As part of the notification process for this project, staff notified all property owners within 500 feet of the project site. We did receive a petition signed by 22 adjacent property owners who live within the city of Bakersfield opposed to the request. The concerns they stated were specifically related to the proximity of the site to schools and then crime that is associated with the sale of alcohol. We have reviewed the request along with the concerns that have been brought forward by the community. Based on all the information in the record, staff is recommending approval of this request to your board as outlined on page 4 of your staff report. There are no existing Type 20 liquor licenses located within the census tract. Due to the existing development of the tract, the project site is one of the only remaining suitable locations for this type of use. The site fronts Allen Road, which is a main thoroughfare that serves the traveling public, and then also Noriega Road to the north, which serves as a primary separation road between the residents and the proposed commercial and industrial areas to the south. The site itself, as indicated in this map, is located within a half-mile away from the nearest elementary school or K-12 public school, and staff does not believe it is located along the primary walking path of any of those schools in the area. And finally, there's only one off-sale liquor license that exists within the census tract, where again, the total of 14 could be permitted based on total population within the tract. Staff is recommending that your board approve the request by making a determination that there is a public convenience or necessity for the issuance of this off-sale beer and wine Type 20 permit located at 4950 Allen Road and adopt the resolution and recommend findings approving the liquor license as requested. That completes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. We'll ask if there are any members of the audience who would like to make comment on item 4. Is there anyone here to speak on item 4? Okay, seeing none, I'll return to the board. Supervisor Couch, this is in your district, so I'll ask for you to go first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I expected some testimony today.
I'm sorry, now I'm seeing a hand being raised.
Sorry, we actually were the applicants for the application.
Okay, I can't hear you unless you come to the microphone. Please come forward.
I think you said he's the applicant?
Yes,
Okay.
I know he did, but
Sorry.
I'm wondering if he wants to speak. You can please identify yourself.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Shashi Kamboj. I'm doing the business in Kern County since 1992, and I have 11 locations at different areas in Kern County. And I'm doing having good relations with every community where I have a business in town. So I'm doing the beer and wine sales since day one without any major issues with the community. And we always keep our beer and wine locked at night, and there's no major issues anywhere in our locations. So we promise to everybody that this location will be same as our other locations.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And if we have any questions for you, we'll ask you to come back up. Supervisor Couch, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Based on the facts that Mr. Murphy kindly laid out for us, I'll make a motion on staff's recommendation. Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved. All ayes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That takes us to our next item on the agenda, be item number 14. This is an item under the Public Works Department, Building and Development. Item 14 and item 15 are related. They're dealing with the same individuals, property owners and operators of a medical marijuana dispensary. And so I'm going to ask that we hear these concurrently, but we vote on items 14 and 15 separately. And I'll ask Greg Fenton, who heads up our Building and Development Department, to start us off. Mr. Fenton, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman Scrivener and members of the board. As you indicated, items 14 and 15 are similar, dealing with cultivation of marijuana. It's on dealing with the same people in the same general location, so I'll kind of set the stage for both of them, and then I'll talk specifically about the individual locations toward the end. So as indicated, today's the time and place for your board to conduct a hearing and consider a petition by the Public Works Department to determine whether violations of Ordinance Code Chapter 5.85, medical marijuana cultivation, existed on August 24th of this year. Again, this is located on a couple of different assessors' parcels on Highway 14. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And also request your board to determine such violations constitute a public nuisance. If I could get Madam Clerk to turn on the overhead, just real quick show where we're talking about here. So this is Highway 14. This is the building that we're talking about on both locations. Item 14 is dealing with some tenant spaces in this area here, assessor's parcel number 236060-28. And then the other grow, item 15, is in this building up here, located, this cultivation was within a marijuana dispensary, and that is APN 236060-25. Again, Highway 14, Mojave proper is a little bit south of there. Department's also requesting today your board impose administrative penalties as provided in the Ordinance Code Chapter 5.85 and 8.54 on Do H. Yoon and Eunice S. Yoon, identified as the owners of the real property, and Big O Relief and Alvaro Ordaz, the persons or entities determined to be responsible parties for violation of the cultivation of medical marijuana in excess of the exempted amount as prescribed in Ordinance Code 5.85. On August 24th, Public Works Department and Code Compliance Division responded to the subject property. It's part of a commercial shopping center, as you just saw. Kern County Sheriff's Department and Public Works staff determined the site was used for cultivation for medical marijuana for Big O Relief Marijuana Dispensary located in this shopping center. There was no one present at the site at the time of the inspection. Staff executed an inspection warrant, and entry was made through the back door, again, of both establishments, and the inspection was conducted. A person on site, identified as a medical marijuana dispensary volunteer, Sharon Gofus, was listed on a medical marijuana recommendation letter posted inside the cultivation area, and at the completion of the inspection, Ms. Gofus arrived to secure the doors that were entered. The Sheriff's Department and Public Works staff, during inspection of the dispensary, confirmed the presence and cultivation of numerous marijuana plants. Again, I'll talk specific numbers here in a minute, but in general, both locations contained marijuana plants in excess of the exempt amount. Notice of violation was posted on the site, and mailed on August 30th, 6 days after our initial inspection. And the notice directed all parties that the violation must be abated within 5 days, or additional administrative penalties would be recommended, and a hearing before the Board of Supervisors could be requested within 10 days of posting that notice. And we did receive the request for a hearing via email on September 8th. The notice of violation also included a statement of financial condition form that was not completed or returned by any party at this time. Subsequent site inspection on September 6th, so that's 6 days after we posted the notice of violation. September 6th, we confirmed that the plants remained on the property, a 30-day notice in order to abate, and a notice of violation and imposition of daily administrative penalties was mailed to the property owners and responsible party on September 13th. Public Works staff determined that the subject site was in violation of Ordinance Code 5.85, again on August 30th. And Chapter 5.85 provides a schedule for the imposition of administrative penalties your board deems appropriate for these violations. Now, when determining administrative penalties, consideration shall be given to several factors. Those factors include the nature and circumstances, extent and gravity of the violation, any harm caused by the violation, any prior history of violations, the degree of culpability, the responsible party's ability to pay the penalty, the market value of marijuana plants in violation, the assessed value of land on which the violation occurred, and any other factors deemed relevant to consider the matter. And in a moment, I will discuss those factors in more detail and provide a recommendation for your board on each of those two cases. The owners, Do H. Yun and Eunice S. Yun, and the persons or entity determined to be responsible parties, that's Big O Relief and Alvaro Ordaz, were notified of today's hearing by posting on the subject property and also mailing on September 15th of this year. So at this time, the department is requesting that your board consider in the following actions. Find that the subject property was in violation of the county's ordinance code, Chapter 5.85, on August 24th for the cultivation of medical marijuana in excess of the amount exempted by the ordinance, determine that such violation was a nuisance, and impose administrative penalties jointly and severally against Do H. Yun and Eunice S. Yun, owners of the subject property, Big O Relief and Alvaro Ordaz, the person or entity determined to be responsible parties for the cultivation per 5.85. So it's recommended that your board conduct a hearing, receive testimony, any other evidence your board may deem appropriate to determine whether the subject property was in violation of Chapter 5.85 for the cultivation of medical marijuana, and if your board does in fact determine that a violation exists, would be appropriate for your board to consider the disregard for the Kern County Ordinance Code on the part of the property owners and the persons to be responsible parties, as well as their lack of efforts to keep the property in compliance or to timely abate the nuisance. It's important to keep those in mind when determining the amount of administrative penalties to impose on the owners and responsible party. Ordinance Code 8.54.130 provides that your board may direct that any unpaid administrative penalties be collected as a special assessment against the property. And staff has reviewed the environmental effects of this enforcement action and has determined that the enforcement action is exempt from further review under CEQA per sections 15061B2, 15061B3, 15301, and 15321 of the state CEQA guidelines. So that's kind of setting the stage for the background of both locations where we encountered the marijuana cultivation. So taking item 14 first, and that would be assessor's parcel number 236060.28. Some of the things to consider, as I mentioned, about the nature, circumstances, and some of the factors that come into play. We identified 1,138 plants. There was 1,150 plants total on this parcel, and that is 1,138 plants over the exempt amount. It was within a commercial shopping center occupying multiple tenant spaces. It's a standard kind of a strip mall with glass storefront doors, Inside were walls framed up to cover those openings so you couldn't see inside. It was blacked out. There were interior walls framed. The facility was locked and secured, and again, there was nobody present at the time. At the time, minimal odor from the marijuana plants were present. However, we received the complaints that the adjacent tenants could smell the marijuana next door, which is how it came to our attention. And I would indicate that 1,138 plants is the largest single marijuana cultivation site that code compliance has encountered so far to date. Another item to consider was any harm caused by the violation. Though I can't point to any specific harms, this is a fairly large-scale operation in a commercial shopping center with public adjacent. Again, it was the adjacent tenants that brought this to our attention. I think it's worth noting that a grow of this size could be a potential target for theft or crime or other violent acts if people were and obviously did know there was a marijuana grow inside. Also concerns, this site, there were no permits, there were interior alterations, significant electrical work to support the lights and the fans and the growing operations. None of it was permitted and inspected. And also there are concerns that of a grow of this size, should there be a fire within the facility, it's not like we're burning up tomato plants. There's concerns about the effects of marijuana smoke for employees, the adjacent tenants, and even the public in general should a fire were to occur. Also within the facility in a storage room, there were several containers of chemicals that we could not identify, most likely fertilizers or chemicals to support and enhance growing, but we weren't able to identify them. Were there any prior history of violations? We do not or are not aware of other violations from the property owner or the operator, other than, again, there's two separate cultivation grows within this same shopping center in excess of the exempt amount. The degree of culpability, in my opinion, the owner and responsible party are fully culpable of the violation. Our current marijuana cultivation ordinance has been in effect for over 2 years. I think it's fairly well known. And in addition, as I mentioned the timeframes earlier, staff provided ample opportunity for them to abate the violation and remove the plants down to the exempt amount without imposing any additional penalties, and they chose not to do so. Other factors that may be considered, again, alterations were made to those spaces without any inspections. Staff provided more than enough time for them to remove the plants and abate the violation. Again, there were 6 days that lapsed from the time we did our initial inspection to posting the original notice of violation, and 6 more days after that when we confirmed they failed to remove the plants. So because of that, and because there were no prior violations, we're recommending some penalties as follows. First of all, there's a couple of different options. Chapter 5.85 provides a couple of different paths for your boards to go down when determining daily penalties. 5.85 specifies that a $1,000 penalty is due at the time of our first notice of violation, but then also provides a couple of options. Either $1,000 per day for each day the violation remains, regardless of the number of plants, or there's a schedule in Ordinance Code 5.85 that gives a per plant per day penalty. And those penalties range from $25 per plant up to $300 per plant per day. Staff's opinion is the $1,000 per day flat rate penalty is not adequate due to the magnitude of the violations or the cultivation operation and the specific circumstances involved. But again, since we're not aware of any prior violations of the cultivation ordinance by either party, it is recommended that the daily penalties be established on the low end of that scale at $25 per plant per day. And in addition, though, again, we posted the notice of violation on August 30th. We went back September 6th and confirmed the plants were still there. But because we did not inform them of the amount of the administrative penalties that we were proposing until September 13th, I'm recommending that the clock start those penalties beginning September 13th. It's almost 3 weeks after our first inspection. So that said, $25 per plant per day, 1,138 plants over the exempt amount is $28,450 per day. Again, that's in accordance with 5.85 of the ordinance code, and that's on the low end of the spectrum of per day penalties. The market value of the plants, it's really subjective. These plants weren't fully mature when we were there. Some of them were getting closer, some of them were in the very young stages. The Sheriff's Department has established a market value of about $6,000 per plant for a mature plant. Assuming $6,000, 1,138 plants, potential value of upwards of $6 million. The assessed value of the land, the assessor's parcel number, the tax assessor indicates the assessed value to be $1,335,865. With our notice of violation in accordance with 5.85, we provided a statement of financial condition form that the applicant can fill out to provide for us to help us determine their ability to pay. They failed to return that form to us, but based on the estimated amount of the mature plants, the land value, the assessed value of the land on which the violation is located, and also based on just the sophistication of the operation. They have spent a significant amount of money on the improvements. Again, the upgrades, the electrical work, the fans, the lights, they have a significant investment, and because of those factors, I believe that they do have the ability to pay the recommended penalties. At this time, starting from September 13th to today's date, 14 days have lapsed. Therefore, the daily penalties would add up to $398,300, plus $1,000 for the initial notice of violation, plus any staff costs that have been incurred to date. Okay, so that's the larger grow, item number 14. Item number 15, I won't go through all of that again. Very similar circumstances, same players involved. Again, this cultivation was within an existing marijuana dispensary. There were 164 plants total, which was 152 over the exempt amount. Similarly, the improvements were done inside. Walls were constructed, electrical work was done, lights, fans, without permits or inspections. And again, we received complaints from adjacent tenants. Because of the same players involved, we still did not identify any previous history of violations, but it is within that commercial shopping center that does pose a risk. Considering, again, $25 per plant per day, at 152 plants over the exempt amount, it's $3,800 per day. Running that 14-day total, penalties to date, $53,200 plus $1,000 for the initial notice of violation and staff cost. So I think that concludes my report. Obviously, there's members in the audience that would like to talk about this. Mr. Rojas and I are here to answer any questions. Oh, one last thing I would like to add, I'm sorry. One of the recommendations regarding payment, if your board chooses to impose these penalties and they fail to pay, item number 5 in the recommendation says that order if not paid within 10 days. That's our typical code compliance cost recovery language. Ordinance Chapter 5.85 for the marijuana cultivation is very specific, and it allows 30 days for the applicant to pay, or we can go ahead and lien their property if your board chooses to. So I'd like to make that change when it comes to item number 5. With that, we're here for questions, or you may choose to open the hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Fenton. Are there any questions from the board before I open the hearing? Okay, I'll now open the public hearing. I'll ask if there are any persons that are present that would like to make comment on items 14 and 15.
Yes.
Wes, please come forward, state your name.
1 second, I gotta get these RICO complaints drafts that I have in my hand. Them there.
We object to this completely. What this body has done is to mix up different laws.
Sir, can you state your name for the record, please?
I apologize. My name is Abraham Labad. I am the attorney for all the persons who are being accused of all the things that were just mentioned.
I'm sorry, so you represent both the Yuns and Big O Relief and Mr. Ordaz, is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Please proceed.
As I submitted a memorandum dated today that specifically applies and talks about why my clients are not in violation of any of the current Kern laws. The current Kern laws are dictated not by this body at this point. They were dictated by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. And then when the decision went to the Supreme Court agreed and rejected your appeal. So therefore, the only case that is, or the only law that is currently standing is the 2009 law, with the addition that this body has put in a moratorium, the fourth moratorium on the same subject, which in itself is not legal, but from what I understand, there's term of art as an excuse is what this body is referring to when somebody questions them. How could you have the same moratorium 4 times over in about 6 or 7 years? But our response has been, well, it's a term of art, and we disagree with that. There are a lot of points why a Big O is not illegal. Big O is not illegal because they're acting as a dispensary, not a grow. A grow is different than a dispensary. A grow is when somebody cultivates for the specific purpose of selling that marijuana to whomever wants to pay the asking price. That is a grow. And in Kern County, the limits for a grow is 6 plants per parcel and 12 immature plants per parcel. And I don't dispute that. However, my clients aren't grows, they're dispensaries. As dispensaries, the current law in Kern County, should anybody want to read them, are simply that a marijuana collective or dispensary acting as a collective within the rules can grow 6 plants per member. My clients have over 2,000 members. That means unless they have 6,000 plants, mature plants, they're not violating the laws. And it's all spelled out in my memorandum. Additionally, as I stated, the Big O has 2,000 patients, so 1,150 approximate. May I ask some questions?
You may ask questions, and then we'll answer your questions when the public comment period is over.
So if they're acting as a collective or a dispensary, and the rule is that they could have 6 mature plants, 1,150 is less than 6,000 plants, so therefore I don't think that's a violation based on what I read the law. Additionally, we presented this body again and again through the attorney's office, proof that my clients existed prior to the moratorium. However, our proof is being tossed away, tossed to the side, or as the representative attorney, when I go to the attorney's office and I try to reason with them, I'm laughed at. I'm being told that there's declarations from God knows who, that say something about my clients not being in existence prior to the moratorium. Well, those people have an issue with those declarations. Those declarations can't say that they have personal knowledge. My clients' declarations can say they have personal knowledge, and they will say they have personal knowledge, and we will prove that in court. We are going to court, and we're going to show how it's absurd to take somebody who wasn't even at the location, wasn't inside the store, and say that give us a declaration, and we're going to go to court with that. And that's what this county has done to my clients. Additionally, the court issued a stay in our last hearing. Now, there may be a dispute as to what the stay covers and what it doesn't cover. But I would warn this body that if you're going to violate a stay, I think the stay was inclusive to the grow as well, because the stay was on the case that was whether my client is a legitimate dispensary or not. And we have a stay on that part, i.e. on the on the default judgment that was obtained. There has been no judgment on the merits, whether my client is a legitimate shop or not, whether they violate the moratorium, whether they existed prior to the moratorium. However, this body, or members of this body, released a press release. I can't believe they put this in writing. But thank you, by the way. Anyway, it basically states that my clients are illegal shops and that he has decided to put together a task force and go after these people. And you know how they go after these people? With guns. They pull guns in people's faces. They put handcuffs on people, innocent people, business people. This is the wrong way that you guys are handling this, okay? And my clients are sick and tired of it, and they're going to go to court and they're going to fight you on this. Additionally, besides the spirit of the state that I think you would be violating, and I'm going to go to court on that and ask the court that even holding this hearing is a violation of the state, to be honest with you, as the court ordered the state. Again, I was the attorney on the case that won the TCEF case, whether you know or not. And in that case, the court said, the Fifth Circuit Court and the Supreme Court of California agreed that unless county can show that the dispensary is 1,000 feet close to the school or less than 1,000 feet close to the school, or they're not in a commercial zone, then county cannot prove that they're not a legal dispensary. So therefore, county has not, on the merit, proven that in any way, shape, or form. I can't understand why anybody would go around besmirching my client's reputation. My client lost members who specifically said, due to this, they are no longer coming to the dispensary. They don't want to associate with an illegal shop. However, my client has never been determined illegal by a court of law, where it should be. This determination, whether legal or not, should be in a court of law. This is a civil matter. You don't send the police with guns, putting handcuffs on people because you don't like something. And that's what this body has apparently done. Again, like I said, no court has indicated at this point where it should be addressed. No court has said that my client is an illegal shop. I don't understand how anybody could say otherwise before a court does. So for these reasons, because of the memorandum, and I ask that you include my memorandum by reference, and I'm doing so. I'm asking for this board to include that into the official record of this hearing. I gave Madam Clerk 10 copies, and Madam Clerk, that will be in the record, and it could be downloaded.
It will be electronically included in the record.
Thank you very much. That basically argues our side. I think the application of law is the issue here. The application of, if they're not a grow and they're a legitimate dispensary, then they're okay. And nobody's saying that my clients don't have members. Nobody's proving my clients don't have 2,000 plus members. Additionally, on kind of a side note, but it's important for my clients, at the last hearing on the 22nd, there was a question answer, and there was a planning director that was here. I think Lorelei, if I remember correctly. Lorelei, yeah, she said something about none of the shops are legal because you have never issued a license. Again, I point you to the TCEF case. That's not what the court said. The court specifically said that the county cannot show that this is illegal unless they could show that they are within 1,000 feet of a school or they are not in a commercial zone. Now, that has not happened. So how could somebody go around and call my clients illegal shops and besmirch them on the record, and we'd like to address that and get a correction on that on the record, or we have to do whatever we need to do to address that. Additionally, I can't believe this was said in public too. Additionally, it was said some group from LA private group from LA with lots of money are going to come to Kern and take care of the dispensary problem for Kern by you guys giving them the license to open up dispensaries. If you want to listen to it, it's on the video of the 22nd of the last hearing on the 22nd of last month. I point you to 1 hour and 48 minutes. The answer question goes about 5-6 minutes. If you go to that video, you could see what I'm talking about. So basically what was said by your planning department head, and it seemed like this body agreed, it's fascinating, that some LA group is going to come and sue dispensaries so that this body could be satisfied that they close down the shops when legally this body couldn't do it, and they're going to let somebody else do it. I'm shocked, to be honest with you. I'm shocked that this is the level that we're dealing with. At this point, my clients are not illegal. My clients have always been legal. We've always come forward with every document. Nobody has ever challenged our documents as to why they're not false. Saying something is false does not make it false. You do not get to say that something is false without some kind of proof. And that's what my clients have been enduring for the last year and a half or year or so that this case has been in court. And again, if there is a civil court action, why would you send the cops? Why would you send in the cops if there's a civil court action? I don't understand. It's in your letterhead. You're sick and tired or your press release, you're sick and tired of these dispensaries, and you're going to handle it yourself and not let the courts do it? To be honest with you, that's like Hitler tactics. It's just Hitler tactics. Anyway, for all the things that I've discussed here, including my memorandum that I've filed, I object to any kind of action that this body takes, including imposing anything. The one smart thing that I would think that this body could do, and again, I'm not here to give you guys advice because it seems like you guys make me money. What I would recommend that you guys go ahead and put this off until the civil matter is heard, and then you can determine correctly by the court whether you're correct or I'm correct, as it's supposed to happen. And I shouldn't have to come here with a gun, and you shouldn't have to come to me with a gun since there's a civil case. So for this reason, I ask you guys to object or reject any recommendations and take no action, and admit or at least stay this action until the civil case is over. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Labat.
Do you guys have any questions?
I don't believe so. If we do, the board members
You
could
don't
call
have
you
any
back up.
questions? How about Mr. Brennan? He seems to
Mr.
want to
Labat.
know a lot of information.
Thank you,
He
Mr.
doesn't want to
Labat.
know?
Mr. Labat, if we have questions for you, we will call you back up. Thank you. Do we have any other members of the audience who would like to make comment on these items, 14 and 15? Okay, please come forward. Could you state your name again for the record, please? I know you spoke earlier, but for this item.
My name is Ana Ortiz Perez. And, you know, marijuana, I used to smoke it, and so did my sister, and my daughter does it still. Okay, there's a lot of man-made drugs. I mean, the pharmaceutical companies are billions of dollars rich. Marijuana has its place in the medicinal field area. I mean, you know, I believe that there's a healer, but some people aren't at that level. And then he meets you where you're at. Marijuana has its place in the healing area with kids that have, and adults that have seizures. Cancer patients use it for being, you know, for their appetites, for pain relief. I mean, it has a purpose and all that. And I mean, I don't understand why the pharmaceutical company, which sells oxycodone and peddles all kinds of drugs, I mean, they're the drug peddlers, and yet they're making billions of dollars because of their lobbyists. And marijuana, one of the least of the, I guess, worst of the drugs, is frowned upon. I mean, I get it. I prefer not to use it anymore, but he meets you where you're at. And for those that need it medicinally, I agree. For those that just use it for pleasure, I don't, that's my opinion. But I think I heard him saying something about that the cops entered the property and there was a sign posted saying that they had a right to do it, and they didn't see all these plants until they further went in, which I think in itself is illegal. I mean, it's kind of fruit from the poisonous tree. You saw this and you smelled it. Who's to say, oh, this degree of weed, I mean, just a little bit smells. I don't know how a lot smells. All I know is that, I mean, did they have a right to enter after they saw that permit and then go and investigate and go look more and then find whatever they found? I mean, to me, that wasn't right. I mean, to me, it's like the guy, they did their job. Somebody complained about the smell. But then again, the law was passed that it's legal, So if they saw that sign and didn't see all those plants after seeing that sign, why did they go further in? I mean, there's got to be justice. There's got to be, I mean, there's a Constitution. I mean, and cops, some are good and some are bad, just like people. Some are good, some are bad. There's really no such thing as good except God. But there's a law, and you can't just fling it around and say, oh, well, we're the cops, so we're just going to do whatever the hell we want. That's not right. That's not law-abiding. And all I'm saying is, if that thing was posted, they didn't have direct access visually to the rest of the stuff, they really shouldn't even have entered. They should have left.
Thank you, Ms. Ortiz. Any other comments? Good afternoon.
Yes, I'm Dennis Fox once again. I'd like to talk to you about two things. Well, I'd like to commend the effort that went into this by the county staff. I think they did a good job. And I'd like to clear up the thing about the guns, and I'd like to go into the term nuisance, which I may be, but that's an on-site, I would like to talk about on-site and off-site nuisances. First thing about the guns. Doing a little post-fire restoration observations, I noticed that some of these people tend to have guns themselves, especially when they're out in the woods. They shoot deer and just leave them because the deer don't die happy because they're eating the crop. They shoot at sheriffs, they shoot at game wardens, and they shoot at foxes. That's the one that got to me. And they shot the windows out. I went to the sheriff went out, and I was teasing their dogs a little. And the dogs attacked the sheriffs, but they weren't dogs, they were pigs. And the guy writes a letter to the editor, good public relations, stating that if there's going to be any pigs shot around here, I'll be shooting them, except they'll have 2 legs, not 4. I mean, this is not too healthy for your mind. And the thing about the nuisance is the off-site nuisance. A while ago, Supervisor Maggard asked the staff what could be done about the homeless people who are wandering around and stuff like that. And this is where it's coming in. You have a nuisance there, but you have a nuisance off-site, like at the libraries, daytime shelters. You're having down at the bus depot, there's an entire subculture. Year ago at a fire, here comes the United States Army with guns, not to work on the fire lines. They came to protect the firefighters from the bullets whizzing around, from the trimmigrants who decided to go in and the owners who decided not to evacuate. So it's a bigger problem than it is funny Saturday Night Live skit stuff. I think the Blues Brothers is something else. So you have this off-site nuisance. I would like to found out that when you do your ordinances, take a look at people under 25. When they start using this stuff under 25, they're not fully matured in the little white matter, and it affects them. It wouldn't hurt to make it that if you're going to allow these stuff, recreation or otherwise, I'm not opposed to it medically, but I was always wondering if somebody's ever been turned down by a doctor. What I was getting at, if you could make it that for any purpose, they have to be over 25. And I think that'd be worthwhile. Then it's not less of a public nuisance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. Any other comments?
Yes, I'd like to, there were some things that were said I'd like to correct. I think there were.
All right, I'll let you come back up.
Thank you very much.
I mean, if there was something specifically given in the public testimony?
Yeah, there was
Okay.
something.
All right.
For some reason, my clients are being confused with somebody who has been going somewhere in the woods or somewhere like that.
I don't think this board is
That's
confused
what
about that.
That's what I took, and I just want to make sure, clarify, that my clients in no way grow in some field or anything like that. They grow in a building, and also my clients do not have guns. I'd like to clarify that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. And this item is in my district, and so I'm first going to ask county staff if they would like to respond to any of the points that were made by Mr. Labad. Specifically, I'm going to ask county council. There was some discussion of the Supreme Court and then a Court of Appeals ruling, moratorium that's in place. There was a statement made by Mr. Labad that this is a dispensary, not a grow, and so the rules apply differently. That was the implication of what he was saying. And also his assertion that his clients existed before the moratorium and whether that's relevant in this case, since we're talking about whether that's the case, first of all, and then secondly, whether it's even relevant in light of the fact that we're talking about cultivation rather than a dispensary activity, and anything else that I might have missed. So, Mr. Nations, I'll turn to you first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To answer your questions directly, the purpose of this proceeding today it has nothing to do with the moratorium. The moratorium is a completely separate ordinance, and we are dealing here today with Ordinance 5.85, which pertains to cultivation. That ordinance has been on the books for a long time, was amended in 2015. As far as the appellate court case referred to, the TCEF case, that case likewise has nothing to do with this proceeding here today. It did not deal with Ordinance 5.85, and the TCEF case is really more of an elections case. Appellate court case that is really more on point from the 5th District Court of Appeal is the Kirby versus County of Fresno case, in which the contention was made that there was a right to cultivate medical marijuana in violation of that county's cultivation ordinance, and the 5th District Court of Appeal ruled that the Compassionate Use Act and the Medical Marijuana Program Act does not create a right to cultivate medical marijuana that is beyond the reach of local land use regulations. And so that is why we have that regulation. It limits cultivation to 12 plants per legal parcel of record. And here you have individuals who are cultivating in violation of that ordinance to a rather dramatic degree. As far as that they are a dispensary and can grow 6 plants per member, there is no state law that permits that. There is no state law that somehow outweighs local land use ordinances when it comes to cultivation. The most recent iteration in the state statutes is that a qualified patient can cultivate 6 plants for their personal use, and a qualified provider can cultivate up to 6 plants per patient, up to 5 patients, not 2,000. So if they were to be doing this legally, they would have to get a state license come next year. And I suppose the state could license that, but only if the local jurisdiction permits it. This jurisdiction does not, and that's very clear. Okay. As far as any other items that you did not cover, oh, he mentioned a court stay. We are in litigation with the Big O Relief folks. We took a default judgment against them. They sought to have that set aside. That was denied. They are now seeking reconsideration of that. But again, that litigation pertains only to the moratorium. It does not pertain to the issue you are dealing with here today. And so any court stay, there is a stay pending the determination on the application for reconsideration. There's a stay of enforcing the default judgment, but that, again, that judgment has nothing to do with why we are here today. I think that answers all your questions, Supervisor.
It does. No, you may not. I've closed the public hearing. And I now ask Mr. Mr. Labatt, that's not how it works here. You had your opportunity. I even let you come back up. Now I've closed the public hearing, and now this is the opportunity for the board to ask questions of staff and make any statements that they want to. So I'm now going to ask Mr. Fenton, do you have any response to any of the testimony that was given here today?
Chairman Scribner, I think Council Nations cleared up the main part. It sounded like Mr. Labatt was kind of intermixing the dispensary and cultivation issues. And just to clarify, as Mr. Nations just did, all we're talking about here today is the cultivation. The dispensary issues is a separate track. Other than that, I don't have any responses to his comments.
Thank you. He did make a statement that during these enforcement visits on September 26th, that guns were drawn and put in people's faces. Were you present during this visit, and did you see any activity like that?
Chairman Scribner, members of the board, I was present on the 24th when we did these inspections at both locations. There were no people present, so there were no guns or handcuffs involved.
Thank you. Okay, I'll ask if any members of the board have any questions. I'm going to recommend that a motion by the board and a motion on staff's recommendation on both items 14 and 15, but I'm interested to hear any comments from members of the board. I see Supervisor Perez is punched in.
Thank
Supervisor
you.
Perez.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Nations, can you address the search and warrant issues? Was a warrant required in this instance? If so, was it, was the scope of the full-scale search identified? Can you help us understand that component? We have sort of a mix of civil and criminal that is implied and I think implicated as we move forward in these matters per Prop 64. So I think there's a remarkable amount of confusion from myself as well. I'm trying to learn these distinctions, as is the state, rapidly catching up. So if you could help me understand that piece as we get started, and then ultimately, perhaps in the context of, your remarks can be in the context of the overall 64 discussion. It has been my impression that a dispensary or a co-op that is serving the legitimate medical needs with legitimately licensed users does have a different level of protection. Could you, address those issues?
Yes. As far as the warrant, as Greg mentioned in his presentation, they had an inspection warrant that was issued by the court when they went to do the inspection. And I'm not familiar with the terms of the warrant, but I suspect it allowed them to inspect the entire facility, which they did. And so the comments about not, I can't remember what the lady was saying, Ms. Ortiz, but that's really a criminal matter. Here they had a warrant. They had a right to enter the premises, and they did pursuant to that warrant. So they acted completely legally, and it's an inspection warrant, not a search warrant, because this is a civil enforcement matter, not a criminal matter.
I see. So you, Mr. Nations, have you reviewed the warrant and search issues, and have you identified any illegalities or vulnerabilities there?
No, it was done by the book.
Okay. Can you address the larger issue? Thank you for that. That's helpful. Can you address the larger issue of whether or not what has Prop 64 done as a legal matter to protect, if you will, or allow certain activities by specifically medical marijuana users? I think there's a fair amount of confusion and discourse about adult use versus medical marijuana. What are the implications for 64 on that? How should we think about that moving forward, because of course this body is considering the larger issues of whether or not to regulate, and if that's possible and if it makes sense for the county, and what are the implications, frankly, of a ban when there appears to be existing rights and opportunities for medical marijuana users that would appear to create some other significant problems and implications because of 64. If you could help flesh that out, I'd appreciate it.
Proposition 64 did not address medicinal cannabis. It addresses what they call adult use cannabis, which is non-medicinal. And be it medicinal use or adult use cannabis, the state law recognizes that as far as personal use, local jurisdictions cannot ban personal use. Personal use being possession of a certain amount or cultivating up to 6 plants within your personal residence. Beyond that, local jurisdictions can regulate or ban because anything beyond that is considered commercial. And so where the state is going right now is they are regulating or going to issue licenses for commercial cannabis businesses. And so as far as a medicinal user goes, they are not considered to be a commercial in the commercial cannabis business if their use is solely personal. In other words, if they can possess up to 8 ounces, or they can cultivate up to 6 mature plants or 12 immature plants within their personal residence. If that's all they're doing, local jurisdictions have nothing to say about that. We can have regulations that govern that cultivation, but you can't ban it. Does that answer your question?
That's helpful. I guess I'm concerned and confused about what will we've heard assertions here today by the attorney that a provider, or I'm not even sure what the term is, a grower that is servicing medical marijuana recipients who have an actual license, and they are customers / patients of this operation, whatever category it fits in, that they are allowed to do that for an accumulation of people and get to this, essentially be under a threshold that would be considered either criminally illegal or civilly actionable.
They cannot do that if it violates a local land use regulation. It could be if you were to go to another jurisdiction and they were to allow collectives to combine together and cultivate a certain number of plants per acre, for example, you could do it there. But you cannot cultivate in violation of a local ordinance. And that's what they are doing. It doesn't matter if they're a collective, it doesn't matter if they're a dispensary. You have to abide with the local ordinance. And that's true under the new state scheme that will be in effect in January. You can't get a license for a commercial cannabis business if to issue that license would be a violation of a local law. So really, the regulation of all of this is local. And I would suggest that these individuals have been misled into thinking that they can violate our local cultivation ordinance. They can't. There's nothing in the state scheme now or in the future that would permit that.
it's so interesting, Mr. Nations, because as I work on this issue around the state on behalf of CSAC and counties that are trying to sift through an incredibly complicated, confusing new structure, we're doing that ourselves here locally. I've heard from a number of people who believe that this is possible, not just here, but around the state. And I'm curious why you think that folks have that misimpression. What has gone wrong sort of in the dissemination of information? Because I believe that there are good faith people who are legitimately confused about this issue. And that concerns me about moving forward today with what are extremely high fines, as my position has been on this issue for years consistently. So that always concerns me, but I feel like there's a reasonable amount of real confusion there about what is allowed by providers of medical marijuana to actual patients. I'm just confused.
I don't know why there would be a lot of confusion. Part of it is probably because this is an activity that has been unregulated for going on 20 or 25 years now, because the state just never thought it was necessary. And so it's sort of like the Wild West when it comes to regulation. Furthermore, because all regulation in this area really starts at the local level, it's done differently from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And so as people talk, they say, well, hey, we can do it here. Why can't we do it there? Well, it's because the regulations are different on a local level from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And so I think that also contributes to the confusion.
Got it. That's very helpful. My last question, Chairman. Do you see any truth or, from the presentation that was made today, which has compelling components to it, do you see any truth to what was presented to us today, as we're not medical marijuana attorneys, we don't practice this, so this is somewhat new, the particulars of the litigation matters. What do you see as, how would you characterize what has gone on today in terms of the way this board was informed by an attorney regarding their client?
On the truth scale of 10 being truthful and 0 being devoid, he's a 0. And I'm not being facetious there. He was misinforming you. And it could be he's misinformed himself, I'm not sure. But a lot of what he talked about just has nothing to do with what we're discussing here today.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Supervisor Gleason.
I'll be quick. I have a couple questions about the medicinal marijuana piece. So what I hear you say is that no matter what we talk about, we are governed by local jurisdiction and local laws, and that local law says 12, what is that local law exactly?
12 plants per legal parcel.
Did you say something earlier about he could have up to 5 if he's got a license for medicinal plants? Did someone say 5? Was it you or was it the other lawyer?
Under the state statute, if you are a qualified provider, you can, what that means is you're servicing qualified patients. You can cultivate up to 6 to 12 plants per patient. Up to 5 patients, though.
Okay, that's what I needed to know. Thank you, I'm done.
Any other questions or comments from members of the board? Okay, as I said, this is in my district, but the chair in this body traditionally does not make a motion, but my request is as I said, we're going to hear these two items concurrently, but we do need to vote separately. And so we have a staff's recommendation for item 14 as well as for item 15. And if I have this correct, do you have something you want to read into the record, Mr. Fenton? As far as your recommendation, again, do you want to reiterate it? What I have is that on the first property, item 14, we're assessing fines and penalties from September 13th until today. That's 14 days for $398,300 plus $1,000 plus staff costs. And then for the second property, is it $53,200 plus $1,000 plus staff costs? Did I get that correct?
Chairman Scrivener, you did, but those are today's costs. That full amount won't be identified until those plants are abated.
Okay.
Again, we issued the 30-day notice. We're starting the clock September 13th, so 30 days from them puts us at about October 13th,
Okay.
at which time we would be prepared to go abate the nuisance, after which we will calculate the fees.
Okay, thank you. So if you could read your recommendation one more time on items 14 and 15, I think that would be appropriate, so we're clear.
Certainly. Again, your board recommended your board find the enforcement action to be exempt from further CEQA review per sections 15061B2, 15061B3, 15301, and 15321 of the state CEQA guidelines. Find the subject property to have been in violation of the Kern County Ordinance Code Chapter 5.85 for the cultivation of medical marijuana in excess of the exempt amount. Adopt the resolution declaring a public nuisance to have existed on the property and approving assessment of administrative penalties jointly and severally against Dune H. Yoon and Eunice S. Yoon, owners of the property, and Big O Relief and Alvaro Ordaz, the person or entity determined to be responsible, in the amount of $1,000 plus $28,450 per day until such time it's abated. An order that if not paid within 30 days, this is a change into your written report, order that if not paid within 30 days, the penalty shall become a lien against the subject property, constitute a special assessment to be placed on the tax roll by the auditor, be collected in the same manner and subject to the same penalties as ordinary county taxes on real property from which the nuisance was abated. Direct clerk of the board to mail the resolution, direct Public Works Department to post the resolution pursuant to Ordinance Code Chapter 8.44.
Thank you, Mr. Fenton. Supervisor Gleason?
I see that Mr. Magnuson.
Yeah, he did, yeah, you,
I just one more question, and then I'll pass it off, Supervisor Maggott. Is there any way you could tell how long this operation had been going on? Could you take a best guess? I won't hold you to it, but what's your best guess?
Looking at Mr. Rojas here, since he's usually the first contact on this stuff. That was for the dispensary.
No, the dispensary we first inspected on this date. It was operating.
In May, we were informed at the location identified in item 15 that the work was being done preparing for the operation. We confirmed it in May. It was not ready. In June 23rd, we confirmed that it was present and operating.
Thank you.
Supervisor Maggard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What is the approximate street value, retail value of the crop?
Supervisor Maggard through the chair. Again, that's a little bit subjective. The sheriff has in the past used a market value of $6,000 per mature plant. For lack of any additional information, and it varies. Again, it's going to depend on the quality, the size of the plant, the yield of the flower or the bud will indicate how much they get out of it.
And times how many plants?
1,138 on the one parcel, 152 on the other parcel. Again,
You're making me do math. 1,138 plus 152?
Yeah. On the first parcel, the larger grow, item number 14, at $6,000 a plant, it's an estimated value of $6,828,000 at $6,000 per plant.
Thank you. So even at $28,000 a day, you're going to have an awful lot of days to eat up the profit margin in $6 million. So what ability do we have to make sure that this crop is not cultivated and sold?
As Mr. Fenton indicated, their intention is to abate the nuisance by, or as of October 13th or thereafter.
Is that before it's mature enough to take a cut?
Supervisor Maggard through the chair, in my opinion, yes, those plants will not be fully mature by that time.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Labad, you have had your opportunity to speak. I'd ask that you please stop interrupting.
I would move the chair's recommendation.
Okay, we have a motion. There's a couple more requests to speak. Supervisor Gleason?
Yeah, I think there's just a mix-up in the lineup. You can delete my name from both places. I think Supervisor Perez wanted to speak.
Okay, Supervisor Perez?
Thank you, Chairman. Regarding the fair market value of the cannabis, are you comfortable, Mr. Nations, with the assessment that's been given to us here today, that that holds muster and that is valid? I'll tell you what I'm thinking. It seems to me these matters are complicated, will change, or the outcomes will change based on a whole host of evidentiary matters. I believe those issues are being resolved. I really feel like I don't have the information in front of me to properly calculate a dollar amount or determine whether or not what's going on here. Can you speak to that?
Well, are you speaking about the dollar amount of the
we were told
penalty?
6,000 here. Is that a dollar amount you've signed off on, or what, how do we determine the value of this?
That is the value of mature plant on the street. That is consistently the value that we have received over the years from law enforcement. I have nothing to disagree with that.
Okay.
As far as the amount of the penalty itself, there's approximately a dozen factors that are taken into consideration. The value of the marijuana crop is only one of them, and they're articulated in the ordinance, and those have all been taken into consideration by code compliance.
Okay. Okay. And you're comfortable with that assessment?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Nations.
Second.
Okay, so this is a motion and a second. This is on item 14. Supervisor Magridge? Yes, sir. Okay, so you have a motion and a second on staff's recommendation on item 14. Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved. All ayes.
Okay, and now in regards to item 15. Do we have a motion?
Do we have a?
Oh, yeah, excuse me. Mr. Fenton, would you please read your recommendation on item 15 again?
Certainly, through the chair, very similar to the last one. Again, find the enforcement action exempt from further CEQA review per sections 15061B2, 15061B3, 15301, 15321 of the state CEQA guidelines. Find that the subject property to have been in violation of County Ordinance Code 5.85 for the cultivation of medical marijuana in excess of the exempt amount. Adopt a resolution declaring a public nuisance to have existed on the subject property and approving assessment of administrative penalties jointly and severally against the owners, Du H. Yoon and Eunice S. Yoon, as well as Big O Relief and Alvaro Ordaz, persons or entity determined to be responsible in the amount of $1,000 plus $3,800 per day at this parcel. And again, order if not paid within 30 days, the penalty shall become a lien against the subject property and constitute a special assessment to be placed on the tax roll by the auditor, and direct the clerk of the board to mail the resolution and direct Public Works to post the resolution per Ordinance Code Chapter 8.44.
Supervisor Perez, I see you punched in. Is that from the last one? Okay, thank you. Okay, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
You have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved. All ayes.
Thank you. And that brings us to the next item on our agenda, which is item 22 under Public Works Department. This is proposed budget amendment to include Senate Bill 1, Road Maintenance and Rehabilitation Accounting Funding and Project List for fiscal year 2017-2018. The impact is $6,628,980 for the road fund. And soon as our Public Works Director, Mr. Craig Pope, is ready to proceed, we'll begin this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The item before you today is basically a simple report on SB 1 and then to take action that will allow us as Kern County to access those funds. First of all, Senate Bill 1, Road Maintenance and Rehabilitation Account Act, RMRA, was signed by the governor on April 28th of 2017. What is SB 1? It's basically a new fuel tax, both on gasoline and diesel. It's also an increase in the vehicle license fee, and zero-emission vehicles will be included as a fee on them also. And what is the purpose of it? It's basically to address our road maintenance issue. People wonder, why do we have to have an additional tax? Aren't we already taxed? About a year ago, I gave a presentation to your board that indicated that our gas tax had fallen since 14. It was at 27 million, and last year, it culminated in July 1, it was only at 17. We were dropping 10 million a year. So not only have we dropped 10 million a year in our revenue sources, our prices of materials has tripled since 1993 when this tax was put into effect. In other words, when we used to be able to build a road for about $300,000, it's up to $1 million. So we haven't had an increase in gas tax since 93. The tax has fallen, the amount generated has fallen by about 10 million a year, and our prices are up triple what they were. So we have implemented a new tax, SB1, to pay for road maintenance. And how is it going to benefit Kern County? 17-18 is only a partial year. They're going to start collecting in November. We'll probably see it in December, or probably right around the first week in January as the money will start coming in. And so the first year, we're only going to see about $6 million. By the end of 18-19, it's going to be up around 15 million as parts of it get implemented. And those parts are whether the vehicle license fee gets in or just when the gas tax hits. So it's going to be increasing up till about 2021, and then after that, it'll just be an inflationary factor. Revenues estimated over 10 years, 172 million. And that's a pretty darn good amount, because you've heard us talk of numbers in the $300 to $500 million range is our need to improve the road system we have. How will SB1 be used in fiscal year 17-18? First of all, we're not going to start any new projects in 17-18 because we only have a partial year of it. We're going to use it on 36 projects, state and federal aid projects, that we're going to leverage $21 million of state and federal money with $4 million of SB1. In other words, if we didn't have that SB1, we'd be letting go of $21 million of state and federal money. It's not just this money we're getting in gas tax, $4 million bucks, that's a lot, but if you can leverage another 20 million, that's where the real benefit comes in. We're also going to do 4 maintenance and railroad grade separation projects. Basically, the money is to be used as match or in maintenance or on railroad separation and grade or on safety projects. Currently, our road PACER rating, PACER is when we go out and evaluate our roads, and we do it every year. Currently, we're 5.4 out of 10. That's pretty sad, and this last winter with a lot of rains really had an impact on it. Our goal, of course, is to get them up to 10. But we figure with about 10 years of SB1 funding, the Public Works Department should be able to bring the roads up to about an 8, looking at how much money brings in and what we're getting for the money. That's pretty good. That's way better than I've ever seen it in the time that I've been here. So this really is a good solution for us. It really is something that we can be proud of. And as we go through with these projects, we will be letting people know when we do it. So SB1 requirements, first of all, we have to adopt a proposed project list into the budget. That's included in your board packet. I have it, and I can put it on the overhead if you wish to see it. But basically, it's those projects that I said, they're state and federal money, and then we're matching them. There are no new projects there. We're just taking the SB1 and using it for match. So we have to adopt that. That's the action item before you today. And once it's adopted, or should it be adopted by your board, we will submit it to the CTC. And once the CTC has something in their hands that says this was approved by the Board of Supervisors as a proposed project list, they will then start the money flowing to us come January. Every year we'll have to submit an annual completed project list. We have to prepare and give to the state every year something called the road report, which is a complete reporting of all expenditures of our road fund, and this will be included in that. So you'll be seeing signs like that. We have a mock-up of one here. This is how the public will know their tax dollars are being put to work. They will see that the money they're doing is actually being put down on the road and doing some good. So with that, I'll answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Pope. We'll open this up for public comment. Are there any members of the audience who would like to make comment on item 22? If you have a question or a comment, please come forward. State your name.
Ana Ortiz Perez. You said that you'd get like 6 million in the first year? So, but that you would apply it towards different projects other than roads, which you said cost about $1 million each now?
No, we're going to be applying the 6 million to various projects. They're all road projects. Yes, and it's that list of about 36 different projects. We'll be applying that money as match to state and federal money.
And that's in Kern County?
Yes.
And what's your system to determine what roads are the most important to target?
We have various systems. One is we rate the roads every year and determine the need based on the condition of the road. Also is the source of state or federal funding has conditions that you can use the money for. Some are sidewalk projects, some are rehabilitation of roadways, some are safety projects.
Is it determined by a board, like which one is the most important? Because sometimes it seems like, I don't know much of this, but sometimes it seems like the like nicer areas of town are taken care of first before the, East Bakersfield, outlying areas. Lamont just came in and thank you guys for helping them. But I'm like, how do you target, it should be split evenly, I think. I mean, roads in the better areas and in the other areas equally.
Ms. Ortiz, we appreciate your
Oh,
question.
is this a comment? No
Yeah,
questions.
we appreciate, no, you can ask questions, but what I don't want to do is to continue to go back and forth between you and staff. So does that conclude your question? Then I'll ask Mr. Pope to answer it for you.
Yeah, that should be.
Thank you. Please have a seat.
Thank
Any
you,
other
Mr.
comments? Any other comments, please? And Mr. Pope will let you wait until we're finished with the public comments, because we have more coming. Mr. Fox.
Dennis Fox again, and I do have a question. You're doing I see some repairs in Lamont on some of the roads there that were caused by people moving a stream. And I don't know of anybody out there getting their 404 permit to move that stream. And I was wondering if, considering what just happened, are they at legal risk for the repair of those roads? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fox. Any other questions or comments from the audience? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Pope, I'd ask if you would first respond to Ms. Ortiz's question. The question in general was about how do we prioritize, how we use the dollars, how do we select the projects?
That is always a very good question, Mr. Chairman. We prioritize based on need. Again, we go out and rate the road system, and every single road is given a number every single year, and we use that as a balance point along with what kinds of money we have available to fix those roads. It is based entirely on need and general overall conditions. It's one of our challenges is to try and keep a certain level throughout the whole county. There's no one area that looks any better than another. That's been my job for the last 20 years. As far as, that is in a nutshell. I'm always evaluating, always driving around, always looking, always trying to find the spot that needs the most work and with the money that we have.
Thank you. And in response to Mr. Fox's question or comment in regards to Lamont,
I'd turn to council to see if they have an opinion on that.
I think he referenced a 404 permit, which I'm not familiar with. Please proceed, Mr. Nations.
I don't think I understood the question.
Okay, well then, Mr. Fox, I would ask if you could submit that question to council in writing, then we can get your response, okay? Thank you. Thank you for your question. We appreciate it. Okay, any other questions or comments from the audience? Okay, seeing none, return to the board. Supervisor Perez?
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Pope, I understand there's an effort underway to repeal SB 1 and take it to the voters next year. I don't know what will happen. We can't predict that. But should that be successful, what will the implications be for Kern County? And if you could help us just sort of comprehend the bigger picture, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Supervisor Perez, through the chair. We have been running about a $10 million deficit in the road fund for the last 4 years. We've about hit bottom. We were able to change our spending such that we could make it through this year until January. We're going to be at a very low cash balance right when the SB 1 hits. That's what is going to keep us going. I don't know how else to put it than that, but you saw state and federal projects being matched. They will go away, there won't be a match. There will be running about 10 million less than what we currently have or have been able to spend. We will have to cut into the road fund about $10 million. That is, we're already at a point where we're buying no new equipment and we're buying very little patch material. So we're down to basically the road fund is basis of material, projects, people, and equipment. And that's, we haven't done any locally funded projects. We're buying very little patch material, buying next to no equipment. So all that's left is personnel. And we'd be in the neighborhood of about $10 million cut if SB1 were to go away.
So if SB1 goes away, you lose you'll get a $10 million hit. You'll have to lay people off, is what it sounds like.
Absolutely.
How many people would you estimate?
Well, we gave a presentation on this about a year ago, and I could refresh that up. But basically, if all we're down to is cutting $10 million, we'd be looking, the average cost of an employee in Kern County is about $100,000. So we're looking at about 100 employees if there's no other place we can cut.
Okay. And based on your assessment today, it sounds like personnel is what would have to be cut.
That's probably the next thing on the block, because through our normal budget process, we have cut most everything else down to the bare minimum already.
So if SB1 is repealed and we lose 10 million in roads, you lay off 100 people, what then?
The biggest issue facing the county is that the county as a whole has to provide for the roads and the safety of the roads. It'll be up to the board to figure out how to minimize our liability on a road system that is falling apart. If we do not maintain them, we have the liability of that.
For accidents that occur or whatnot, is that what you mean?
That's correct. And it's just, I mean, it's just, from my experience again here doing this for so many years, it's just good business practice. If you want business to thrive, you want people to get to work, you have a good road system, a good transportation system. That's essential. It's kind of in the background. People don't think about it. It's just a given. But that's how we keep it a given, is by providing the funds to do it.
Okay. Thank you. That's all, Chairman.
Supervisor Couch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you comment, Mr. Polk, on SB1 and a provision in there that would be called a maintenance of effort that requires cities and counties to continue spending, and I don't know what pool of money they have to continue spending in order to receive funds from this pot of money?
Yes, I don't have the exact dates in front of me, but it was named 4 years, that you take those 4 years and average how much general fund contribution was given to the road fund, and you match that in every year that you wish to receive SB1. And we've already done that for this year. That was the general fund contribution number that was put into our budget.
What was used during those 4 years for that calculation was the general fund contribution, not the stimulus.
Nope,
package that you
just
might
the
have
general
received.
fund contribution.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
I'll move the staff's recommendation. Thanks.
Do we have any other questions or comments from members of the board? Okay. Otherwise, I'd ask for a second.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved. All ayes.
Thank you, Mr. Pope. Okay, that brings us to the final item on our agenda. This is item 30. This is an item under the County Administrative Office, General Services Division. This is an update on development of strategic plan for Hart Memorial Park. And I see that we have Jeff Hill, who is with our General Services Division. And so, Mr. Alsop, is Mr. Hill going to lead the discussion?
I'm going to lead and quickly hand it off to Mr. Hill.
Okay, very well. Please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good afternoon. It's my pleasure to open discussion on this item this afternoon. As you're aware, in late spring, your board made a referral to staff to develop a plan for improvements to operations, maintenance, and facilities at Hart Memorial Park. We are here today giving you an update on that plan. Prior to handing things over to Mr. Hill, who is our acting assistant CAO for General Services, it's important to recognize two individuals from the community here with us this afternoon that have played a very important role in our planning to date, and I apologize for the wait, but thank you very much for hanging through. I hope it was entertaining. Any good planning on a community asset starts with having an understanding of what users of that asset think, a community input process. Following your board's directive to staff, we asked Ms. Chris Frank and Ms. Cheryl Barbich to design and lead the effort to collect input from the community on the past, present, and future of the park. They both kindly volunteered their services. And for those who don't know, both Chris and Cheryl have been leaders in our county for some time, involved in one way or another over the years with most everything that has been important, in my opinion. And they both have great experience leading community input efforts like this. This is really their presentation today, and they'll be speaking to you shortly, but I wanted to thank them both right up front and for saying yes, for their trust, their hard work, some late nights, and all the effort they put into this for all the rest of us here today in the discussion we're going to have. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Hill.
Good afternoon, Chairman Scrivener, members of the board. By way of short history of Hart Park, in 1921, County Supervisor John Hart convinced the county to purchase property along the Kern River, east of Gordon's Ferry, to create a large recreational park that residents could use to escape the summer heat. Park was developed almost entirely through generous private donations for materials and volunteer labor. When the park was completed in 1936, it was christened Kern River Park. It had numerous recreational and aquatic opportunities, including a swimming pool, zoo, and amusement park. 10 years after John Hart's death in 1947, the Kern River Park was renamed Hart Memorial Park in his honor. Today, Hart Memorial Park is comprised of over 300 acres of developed land, including 2 lakes, 3 canals, and there are several large fields for lawn sports, including 2 18-hole disc golf courses, picnic areas, an equestrian trail hugging the north side of Hart Park against the river, and scenic bike paths meandering through the property that end up at the Kern River Golf Course. Hart Park has seen numerous changes and challenges through nearly a century. Your board tasked the CAO to engage the community in creating a vision for Hart Park. In other words, what the Hart Park could become in the future. Consultant Cheryl Barbich and Chris Frank volunteered to design and facilitate the public forums intended to identify the strengths, challenges, and to envision the future of what they would like to see for the park. The use of outside facilitators helped to ensure the objectivity of the content and the process and the outcomes of the public meetings. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Cheryl Barbich. She's going to explain the process and present the results of the public meetings. I'm sorry, Chris Frank is coming up as well.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, members of the board and people in the audience. When Ryan came to us and asked us to design and plan a community input process, Chris and I were pleased to accept the opportunity to do that. And we did, as mentioned, volunteer our time. And we are still waiting for a bottle of wine, a large one, fine wine, maybe 1 or 2 each. Anyway. Yeah, thank you. In any case, we did facilitate some community input sessions in 3 parts of the community. One at the Richard Prado Center in East Bakersfield, one here in your chambers for Central Bakersfield, and one at the David Head Center in Lamont. Those sites were selected to provide accessibility for most of the community, and particularly those who use the park the most. The meetings were publicized on radio and television, the Bakersfield Californian, El Popular, and social media. We were really pleased that 213 citizens turned out for these meetings, some of them more than once, but that's okay. And then another 136 participated through email submissions and that sort of thing. We made every effort, Chris and I and the staff that was working with us made every effort to give everyone an opportunity to speak. In the smaller groups, that was a little easier, and it got a little more challenging as the groups grew. However, we also then tried to document what was being said because there were a lot of good ideas. And then I just want to say that for those that came more than once, they were very kind and allowed those who had never had an opportunity to participate to speak first. So we want to thank them for that consideration. As mentioned, the process was used to identify strengths of the park, weaknesses, challenges of the park, and a vision for the future. We asked 3 questions. What do you love about Hart Park? What are the biggest challenges for Hart Park? And what would excite you to see in the park in the future? We used flip charts to record what was being said and tried to consolidate some of it because it could go on and on and on, but there were a lot of really good ideas and great input on the part of the community. And then we used a voting mechanism to prioritize so that we could report to you what, in large, the community had to say. The results, when we looked at the answers to what do you love about Hart Park, there was a theme that kind of ran through, and that was a theme about natural habitat and how much people love that. And you'll see it come back in the answers to what is your vision for the future. The largest number of participants said that they love the natural setting, they love the natural habitat, they love the trees and the shade and the opportunity for solitude and serenity. They loved, the next highest vote was similar to that in the sense that they loved the amenities that were available at the park, hiking, biking, horseback riding, and fishing. They also noted that the park is a friendly place for kids and seniors and dogs, and that it was also a great place for the education community to sporting events as well as educational opportunities out there. The third highest ranking was, again, in alignment with that same theme, but that it's a wonderful public place that is free to participants, and a great place for families and friends to meet and congregate. Rounding out the top vote getters was the love for the water features, the lake and the river, and that aesthetic that those water features add, as well as the recreational activities of water as long as it's safely done. Then when we got to what do you see as Hart Park's biggest challenges, the overwhelming answer was maintenance. And the maintenance in terms of barbecues and restrooms and fences and tables and chairs and those sorts of things that are in dire need of help. And also in this category was the need to maintain the trees and also the cleanliness of the water and rodent burrows and things that could be dangerous to people using the park, and the trail erosion. But in talking about maintenance, the participants recognize that it has a lot to do with funding availability. And so it's not like this is what we want, but not recognizing that there's a cost. And so that was the second highest concern of participants, was the challenge of funding. And then the funding was not only about maintenance, but also about law enforcement, because the third highest challenge was the graffiti, the littering, the racing, fast cars going through the park, and vandalism. And then finally, going right back to that litter piece, is litter. Litter's a problem in the park, and they really want a lot more trash cans out there. So then we said, okay, how do we address what would you be excited to see at the park? And we asked the participants to close their eyes and think about 5 years in the future and visualize what they would like to see in the park. And then when they opened their eyes, to tell us what their vision was. And this theme came back again about natural habitat. The #1 vote getter was they envisioned a quiet park with lots of trees, well maintained, and they were not interested in any really major infrastructure changes. And to quote one of the, I think in your packet, you'll see the quote from one of the participants that said, "We don't want Disneyland, we want a park." The second thing was in terms of the funding challenges. This was really interesting that it came up at exactly the first meeting, and people saw that this would be a really good idea to do some public-private partnerships that would allow donors to come in, make donations to the upkeep of the park, or also to maybe adopt areas of the park, and even to the point of being able to fund additional options for the park in the future. Some people, and the third highest vote getter in this vision category, was that some people envisioned a version of the past. They remembered the paddle boats and the railroad and the kiddie games from their childhoods and wished that we could have some of that back in our future of the park. And then the walkers, hikers, and equestrians saw well-marked trails with fences and plaques that maybe would talk about the flora and the fauna that you see in the park as you use these various trails. And one really interesting idea besides well-maintained trails was a boardwalk along the river with seating so that people could stop and just reflect on the river from that boardwalk situation. So there were three other visions that didn't make the top, but they were close, so we just wanted to mention them anyway. And one was they'd like to see more food vendors out there, so you don't have to bring your own picnic necessarily. And that there should be something like a splash park or a water park or something that children could avail themselves of. And then finally, some displaying of historical markers that talked about the history of the park. So, in conclusion, we would especially like to thank Jeffrey Hill and also Brett Haney for their leadership on this project, and some of their hardworking staff that were out there setting up, particularly in Lamont, as we started gaining momentum of the people showing up. They were out there setting up chairs as if people were coming in. Sandy Formhals, Leslie Wallace, Kimberly Fleming, and Angela Granheim. And we would also like to thank some folks from the CAO's office who provided interpretation assistance to us, particularly in Lamont. And to say that it has been a pleasure working with this group of people. We enjoyed, late nights, whatever, but it was a good experience for us in working with the community and with the staff. And so at the conclusion of the total presentation, we'd be more than happy to answer any questions you might have. But meantime, we're going to pass the...
May I make one comment, please?
Yes.
Members of the board, and in addition to thanking people in the community within the county, also those people that took the time to come out and to give their input, we made two promises as we executed these three public sessions. One was that everyone would be allowed an opportunity to speak, and I think in many cases they were even encouraged to speak. They were called upon in a comfortable environment. And the second was that we would document every single thing that was said, every recommendation, every comment, and all of that information. I just want to validate that we have handed that all off to the county offices, and they have done a remarkable job of coalescing it all together. So again, we thank you for that.
Well said.
And thank you, my partner.
Yeah, our partnership.
Thank you very much.
So we're going to hand this back to Jeffrey Hill, the Director of General Services, to talk about next steps.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Ms. Barbich.
Okay.
And Ms. Frank, thank you. Mr. Hill.
Thank you, Cheryl and Chris. Okay, we are now faced with the question of what to do with the information that we've got. Moving forward, we propose using the information collected at these public meetings as a basis for an improvement plan for the park. To that end, we have prepared a request for qualifications and proposal. It was attached to the board packet. That is a draft with some comments that will have to be, some amendments that will have to be made prior to release from county council. This RFP will seek a proposed plan from local interested and statewide architectural firms that specialize in park design and development. The selected vendor will use the information gathered from the public meetings, the email submissions, the 2010 Parks Master Plan, along with comprehensive review of existing facilities as a basis for the development plan for Hart Park. The final deliverable for this contract will be an actionable design, development, and construction plan for the park. This will inform future staffing requirements, law enforcement, budgeting, and maintenance operations, and will also focus on revenue-generating improvements that will help with long-term sustainability of the Parks Department. When the development plan is completed and project elements are identified, General Services will report back to your board with the results and suggestions for next steps. The projected timeline from this point is to complete the Parks Development RFP, which takes us through the solicitation, review and evaluation, and award by mid-December, and to complete the Parks Development documents, in other words, deliverables that we'll get from the vendor or from the architectural firm, by the end of January. That is the end of my prepared comments, and we're ready to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. I'll ask if any board members have any questions or comments before I open it up to the public. See none? Do we have any members of the audience that are here that would like to make comment on this item? Please come forward. Good afternoon.
Yes, my name is Margie Bell, and I participated in 2 of the official meetings and somewhat in the working group that met before the official meetings. Harry Love, who is in Minnesota today, asked me to say a few words, and I have a couple words of my own. Harry kind of spearheaded the discussion, as you remember, about Hart Park, and was very concerned about turning away people who might be discouraged from using the park because of fees attached. And we started a working group at Emmanuel Lutheran Church, and a couple of people who were there from the very beginning even know more about that working group than I. But these are Harry's words that he asked me to deliver to you. Harry said, "I had the honor of attending all 3 public meeting sessions related to the improvement of Hart Park. At each one, members of the public put forth ideas on the merits of the park, its past glories, and the need to have it meet the current expectations of the general public. The daunting task was handled wonderfully by Chris and Cheryl. At the beginning of each session, they clearly explained the process, that is, a democratic approach. Using a 3-part approach, they asked the audience to list the merits and needs for the park. Then the audience prioritized the list. This was a valuable aspect of the process. It allowed the participants to combine similar thoughts, thus synthesizing. This process became the editing process. Finally, both Chris and Cheryl epitomized the ideals of community involvement and the essential role of volunteers. Their enthusiastic approach was reflected in the thoughtfulness of the participants. They made this first step in making Hart Park the jewel of the county a success. Future civility and cooperation will be the key to success. We owe them our gratitude for setting the tone and groundwork for future input." And these meetings were really extraordinary, and everyone, including myself, was invited to participate. And this is a town meeting style at its best, and we commend the board for suggesting this and for proceeding in a process that was very satisfying, I think, to all the participants. I have just a couple of words. These are not Harry's words, and I'm not sure he would agree with me, but I am concerned about the budget and how we're going to pay for an outside agency to prepare plans for Hart Park. This is serious business. What other money needs to be raised for the improvements, and how do we plan to raise the money above what we already pay annually for Hart Park maintenance? Many of us want only simple improvements. The restrooms, improving the fencing on the river. Let's see, I said restrooms, perhaps a walking path on the perimeter of the park. And are not sure that we need to hire some expensive firm to do the simple things. And I was also thinking maybe there should be some kind of three-step process where we do the simple things first, and then as a foundation or fundraising effort gets going, we could go on to bigger plans. But those were just my thoughts. Thank you so much for encouraging this town meeting style process. It was very successful.
Thank you, Mrs. Bell. Good to see you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Eddie Lane, E-D-D-Y, L-A-I-N-E. I have a handout for the members of the board. I appreciate this opportunity to be here today. There's been a lot of work done on this issue for months, and my perspective is a little different. I'm from kind of the grounds level because I live out in Rio Bravo and I drive through the park every day. So I see what goes on in the park, regular quiet days and on the weekends, and it's from that perspective that I bring my comments to the board. It seems to me that we've looking back from January, we've missed some things. As much work has been done, we missed some things. One thing we missed is a direct survey of the people who were in the park itself. This was the first request that was asked in these chambers way back in January and February, that the actual people, and these are people on the weekends, these are family folks, these are not necessarily folks who are going to go to government-type meetings. And they're also, by and large, low income, and also, by and large, Hispanic. And we do have I'm going to use the term loosely, mandate from the state. It's called SB 1000 to involve the disadvantaged communities in planning. And I believe that those people who go to the park, especially on the weekends, need to be integrally involved in this process. And as far as I know, there's been no actual survey work done in the park of those people who use the park. The community, no disparaging comment of any kind about the community work that was done. But in terms of surveys in the park, I'm not aware of any. The second area of concern has to do with funding. Many of us got involved in this because of our desire not to have a fee, especially for the people who have limited resources, who use the park. And that was our major impetus. Well, the fee would be generated based upon the budgetary needs of the park. And you were told in January that the park cost $750,000. We were told in February the park cost $1.2 million to maintain. We've asked that there be a detailed breakout of what is the cost of maintaining this park. Before we go further, before we go forward, we need to have a working budget of the park. This county spends $12.6 million in the overall park's budget. That's more than twice of Fresno and Tulare counties combined. So a lot of taxpayer money is going to the parks. But where is it going to Hart Park? The $750,000 figure, Hart Park was 6% of the budget. The $1.2 million figure, it would be more than 6%. So you need to have a working budget of Hart Park before you proceed. This is common sense. Working budget. Some other issues, and I've outlined them there. I don't want to take too much of your time. Again, I was the trash bin king. I'm the one who brought in the trash bin pictures and showed them to the board. So I look all the time to see what's going on with the trash bins. and I think Supervisor Gleason's staff have communicated with them on an ongoing basis. Well, we have more trash bins in Hart Park. So, Mr. Whoever, thank you, we've got them there. They're not necessarily allocated around the park in a totally common sense manner, but at least there are more trash bins. So we made some progress in that regard. I would encourage a careful look at how they're dispersed. But I want to bring up another issue. You know, every day I drive through the park, and all summer long, this is a picture of the Veterans Memorial. The grass is dry. Part of it's just dirt now. Things like trash bins and watering in the park, those ought to be our priorities. Before we talk about hiring an engineering firm, let's take care of some of these basics. Again, I appreciate this opportunity, and I appreciate the counties. You know, if you folks hadn't been really receptive to community input, a lot of folks would have been paying a fee, and some of them would have had a hard time going to the park during the last several months. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. Who will be next, please?
Hello, my name's Shirley Skinfield, and I've been here before to talk about the park. And first of all, I want to thank everybody, all the work that Ryan and Brett and these ladies, everyone has done. I got to participate in the town hall meetings, and they were great. Everybody got to have their say, and it was a wonderful way of handling that. I do agree with Ms. Bell about the money that might be put out to do a comprehensive plan for the park. I think that's a good goal, but I also think that maybe a slower process of addressing some of the immediate issues should come first. Somehow finding a way to find the funds to do some of the immediate things, trash, restrooms, the fencing that has fallen down because of the river taking away some of the banks. Some of those are safety issues. I very much appreciate the signs that have gone up to do with safety for the river. Recently, I was out in the park and feeding one of the kitties. I help with that a little bit once in a while. And talking to a family that was nearby that were not from our area. And I said, now you do understand that the river's not safe. Oh, no. Well, where they were gonna head into the river or down by the river, there wasn't a sign there. It would be lovely if we could afford more, but I understand that that's a cost factor also. I thought I'd heard Ryan or Brett or someone talk about talking to people out in the park, families that were out there. Maybe it wasn't a regular survey, but speaking to other people out there. And so maybe some of them have some ideas on what the users on the weekends, some of those families have to say about the idea of a fee. And that's, again, my concern that there's going to end up being a fee to support some of these plans that might have to come about. Obviously, they're not going to be free, so I'm hoping all those things will be part of your consideration as we move forward. So thank you again. We appreciate all of your work.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I'm Anna Bettis. Thank you, everybody. My family, we use that park. I have some memories there. Anyway, with regard to the cost, I mean, like, there's a juvenile system. I mean, those kids can take a field trip out there and be in surrounding nature and contribute and work, like to teach them a work ethic, painting the parks, the bathrooms, cleaning them up, fixing stuff. Maybe somebody, I don't know if they have people there that volunteer or the actual staff that's there. I'm sure there's somebody there that's handiwork that can teach them how to fix stuff. And they can then have a picnic afterwards. I don't know. I mean, there's other ways of doing stuff without having to spend money on contracts and stuff like that. I would recommend the juveniles facility to do some of that work. And then with regard to the landscaping and stuff like that, they can do that too. And maybe there could be a day, a popular one, where the people that go there themselves, if it says it's some kind of slogan, avoid the fee, you know, contribute somehow to where the people that use the park, and trust me, Latinos are hardworking people, they'd be willing to, like, I'm sure there's wood carvers, they can make the signs. I mean, make them natural looking instead of like the metal thing you always see. There's a lot of talent in people if you're willing to use that instead of using, saying, oh, there's money. I mean, use people power, use people bartering. You know, you get the park for free, give us some of your work, you know. But thank you for all your help.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, I don't see any other comments. I'll return to the board. Supervisor Gleason, this park is in District 1. Please proceed.
Yes, it is. Staff, can I ask you to comment on any comments you want to make before we even begin the conversation?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Supervisor Gleason, members of the board, thanks. I appreciate the opportunity. I jotted down some things. First, I live out in East Bakersfield, and I drive through that park probably 5 or 6 times a day. When I'm not driving through that park, I'm running through that park on the weekends. And when I'm running through that park, I run all the way through the park and I visit with people that are there at the park doing things, whether it's at the river playing disc golf, which by the way is by far the most popular activity out there. It's crazy. Is that right? Isn't that right, Jeff? Yes. You like the fact that I'm driving through there all the time. I'm always talking to Jeff about it and staff. So I appreciate what you said, sir, and I'm out there a lot. Polling of folks that are out there, we've done that. I wouldn't say it's been formal, but we've gone out there. In fact, we sent a camera crew, KGov, out there with one of our staffers on Memorial Day weekend who went around and got interviews of families on camera. And we showed a video of those folks, I believe either at all these or at least one of the public sessions. But we captured a lot of that on video, and all of that input is being included. And I'm including all the interaction that I have with people in that. On the budget, I'm a taxpayer, and I'm also the CAO who manages the budget, and I would argue that nobody's more concerned about it than me. And that said, you know, I don't, in terms of the going outside from, in my opinion, as the CAO here and my recommendation, I'm wanting some additional perspective. I'm wanting, that park has looked the same forever. It was the same when I was a child going out there. You know, now today minus, you know, everything's kind of broken, a little more broken down. You don't have the amusement stuff. I think we need some perspective. And I would like to see what we may be able to get from folks who do this on a consistent basis for a living, who might have been recognized for it, that might take the input that we give them, the tours that we will give them, the stories and the history that we will give them, and see what they have to, see what kind of perspective that they've got. And so I'd like to see that. I think it would be a mistake to not do that. Listen, we're, going out there. There is a lot of stuff that needs to be done out at the park. Some of it is immediate. Some of it is more long-term, more expensive. I can tell you that we can do all that at the same time. Hart Park is one of 40 parks that we have. And so we are in the middle of the process of reforming the way that we deliver services at these parks, all 40 of them, in the third largest geographic county in the state. We're all spread out. I believe we do have the budget to handle these parks, maintenance-wise. That's my belief. We'll see if that's the case once we sort of retool the way we manage these. Going forward, we're going to be zero-based budgeting on these parks. That's the discipline that we're going to apply. We're going to figure out what our priorities are, where they are, what they are, how we want to deploy them and tackle them, and we're going to budget that way going forward. It's going to inform where we put staff, where we spend our time, our resources, all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, we can do a good job on trash. We'll get more trash cans out there. We'll have more touches on the park more immediately. That doesn't require a consultant or a lot of money. We're going to do all that stuff. But at the end of the day, we're going to be spending some money out at Hart Park, and we're going to be spending money at other parks, not just Hart. And if we're going to do that kind of an investment, if we're going to get a plan, which I believe we need before we can get anybody excited about anything, and that's what this is all about, that's before we have public-private partnerships. You got to have a plan, and you got to get people motivated behind it. If we're going to spend that amount of money, we got to make sure we do it right. And so while I have high regard for the staff here at the county, I believe they're talented and capable. I believe that this effort out at Hart, I think requires some outside perspective that I'd like to see. And we'll see what's delivered. And I believe that this is the first park of many that will repeat this in going forward. So maybe I left something out, but I'm trying to answer all the comments, and I'll answer any questions that you have, Supervisor.
Thank you. Okay, I got a couple comments. First, I've been to 2 of those meetings, those town hall meetings. Thank you very much for sponsoring those, putting those on. I thought that was a great effort. Cheryl, thank you very much. Chris, thank you very much for coordinating and your patience and the tenor and the way we got information and the way you went about it. I was impressed. I think we got some good bang for the buck, and I think your efforts were well spent. And you've brought us to a point where we've advanced the ball, and we'll see what that's going to take us. We wouldn't have been able to do that, Cheryl or Chris, without your support. And so thank you very much. I'd like to have a better understanding of the project that we did in 2010 and how it relates to the project we're doing today. And we've done something. I know these are 2 independent deals, but I would like to have a better understanding. Maybe you can talk to the differences between the 2, what we've done as a result of that project we started in 2010, what we've accomplished, and why we're doing another project. Did we finish enough of 2010? What is the relationship between I just don't want to do project after project after project and still have dry grass on our Veterans Memorial. I mean, that's unsatisfactory. So can you talk about 2010 and how it relates to this project? Yes.
Supervisor Gleason through the chair. The 2010 master plan was a parks master plan that dealt with systemic issues throughout all of the parks in Kern County. To boil this down, there in the executive summary for this master plan, there were 2 goals and 2 suggested policy changes and 12 goals. Those were all related to, again, systemic, large-scale parks Parks Department-wide issues. This effort for the RFP for the Parks Improvement Plan, for the Hart Park Improvement Plan, is specific to Hart Park. Now, this is nested, this effort actually is nested within the recommendations of the 2010 Master Plan. For instance, Goals 10 and Goals 11 within that master plan refer to engaging Kern County residents in the planning, stewardship, and programming of parks and recreation resources. That's just a part of that goal. Goal 11 is to design and manage county parks and recreation facilities to support families, provide youth with healthy and safe recreational activities, and to encourage community building. I think that this effort goes a long way to advancing those two. It's worth noting also within the 2010 Master Plan that there are suggestions that we probably wouldn't do. For instance, it talks about increasing the size of parks within the county to 5 acres per 1,000 residents. We're currently less than 2. I don't know that we can take that budget. That's a budgetary question that the board and the CAO have to tackle. But that's a significant bite to take. There are other of the goals that we are actively pursuing. For instance, rehabbing and renovating parks. In the past 5 years, the CAO's Office in General Services has done $10 million worth of improvement to parks throughout the county.
Could you say that one more time? Say that again.
Kern County has done $10 million worth of capital and major maintenance improvements in the past 5 years throughout the county. That is are projects that are approved by your board at either the budget, at the annual budget, or through improvements that are approved throughout the year. So we're maintaining, your board and the CAO's office continues to make improvements to at least stabilize our park system. Achieving financial stability is another issue that is within the 2010 Master Plan. That is done through looking for revenues. Part of this effort with the Hart Park Improvement Plan will be keeping an eye on improvements that help to generate revenue long-term. This will help with the park's stability, financial stability over time. So those are just some of the differences, or some of the parts of the 2010 Master Plan that the county has acted on. Previously, when Parks was a standalone system, a standalone department, through the inclusion into General Services, we continue to maintain this effort of improvement.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. A couple of other comments. Another major concern I have is I understand that we were going about this as a targeting Hart Park. We're going to fix that park, and then we're going to take lessons learned while we're doing that park to look at a broader scope of parks within our county, the 40 other parks, and make sure we take lessons learned and grow and improve or shrink and improve parks throughout the county. And I'm concerned very much that we don't spend all our money on one park and at the cost of the other parks. Any comments?
That's not my plan, Supervisor.
Thanks. And, okay, so that's a good one. I also agree with what Mr. Lane said earlier about growing to that place where we want to spend money at an RFQ, making sure that we've already got enough information that we could take some action steps now before we do the RFP. When do you plan on going out with that RFP or RFQ?
If we get through this board meeting tomorrow or the next day, whenever we can get it out,
Okay, before you go out with the RFQ, let's answer, I think it's an underlying concern from some of the folks out here. What I heard them say, maybe it's not exactly what they meant, but what I heard them say was they're concerned that this RFQ and the process we're going through is going to cost money, so it's a foregone conclusion that one of the findings of the RFQ are going to be assessed charges or have fees for people to use the park. Is that a correct thought?
We are not focused on a fee for entering or parking in the park. That's not our focus. We would like to see some thought put into facilities at the park that may generate revenue. Regional parks in other counties may have and do have a certain public gathering areas, big sort of barbecue, band shell sort of areas that would be reserved and rented, and it's things like that. So we are not making an entrance fee to the park part of this process. Supervisor.
So it's not a predetermined conclusion that we are going to have a fee or a charge just because we're doing this work to come up with ideas for park improvements?
No, and I also would add that your board will pay nothing. The county taxpayers will pay nothing if at the end you all decide you don't want to execute on any of these proposals. This is simply a solicitation for proposals using the public input outlined by Ms. Barbich and Frank earlier as the starting point, the basis.
Mr. Hill, would you care to comment on specifically on, the only reason I'm asking this is because it was brought up today with the Veterans Memorial and the trash cans. There seems to be, and what I've seen in parks in District 1, there seems to be some improvements we can make in immediate improvements. Did you care to comment on any of those? And not just those, if you can come up with other ideas. I mean, I know we're talking internally in the Parks Department. Is there something we want to talk about with that?
Supervisor Gleason, through the chair, yes. General Services is currently looking at improvements internally, operationally, as well as looking at costs and expenses and revenues to make improvements for the park's appearances as well as safety. So. We are, as an example, we're looking at conversion to xeriscape in some areas. In other words, areas of the park that we can return to sort of natural beauty that require less effort in terms of labor and materials to maintain those. We are formalizing ground schedules so that staff has a very organized plan to maintain parks so that we get the number of touches on parks that it needs. That is with repair and maintenance, as well as formalizing the actual grounds, the grounds work that takes place on a routine basis. We're tracking costs per park and per asset. This year we revised our accounting process so that we are able to tell, we'll know where we spend how much money and on what, and that is areas of related to the cost of parks rangers, the cost of operations staff, ground staff, administrative staff, and we will be able to track those by park, so we'll know really what our costs are. We're modernizing the reservation system. That reservation system will make it far easier for the public to reserve spots, as well as make it more streamlined on our part so that our costs of maintaining the reservation system go down. We have a focus on transferring some parks. We have transferred some parks, and we're working on transferring other parks into jurisdictions that currently have parks facilities. That was also a 2010 recommendation, working with the jurisdictions in which our parks exist. I think that about that about covers kind of these are our current efforts. Staff is working on this from the ground through to administration within General Services in the CAO's office.
Okay. As we move forward in this process I'm going to vote to support your efforts. I commend you. I'm looking forward to the same level of Kern County excellence that we've seen in, for example, Animal Services Department, and we've seen Kern Medical. We've done some amazing things despite having no money in our budget. We somehow, and it's through the incredible work of our staff and our CAO and other folks, that we are just amazing me in many ways, and I'm looking forward to seeing the same thing happen in the Parks Department. I want to see parks that are either treasures or they're not, and we don't own them. And I think that's the way we need to go about it. We put value on them, and it has to be, if we don't value them, then get them off the books. And if we do value them, then let's do it. So I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much for all your answers. I know I asked you some tough ones today. I hope the public got answers to their questions and their concerns, and can build some confidence in the directions we're going. And I'm going to make a motion to receive and file. Is that their motion? I will make a motion to receive and file.
Supervisor Couch? What? You want to defer to Supervisor Maggard? Supervisor Maggard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would, in homage to our departed colleague, Mr. Mabin, I would heartily second the motion to receive and file. He was always good to remind us we need to receive and file that. And I am thinking of him as I'm doing that. So thank you for making that motion, Mr. Gleason. First, thank you to all the folks that helped with this. Christian, Cheryl, thank you for doing all you've done. And I chuckled when I thought about, we sure got a big bang for the buck, didn't we? Because we didn't spend a buck getting you here to do this for us. So thank you for your help with that. And for the public to persevere with us. It's always fun to watch the public come and engage and not really have any idea where it's going. It's kind of frenetic and chaotic, and but eventually it comes together with it coalesces, and I always enjoy watching the public be baffled as you tell them to close their eyes and dream for a moment. You know, nobody knows how to do that effectively. They think it's just weird, but it turns out to be a good thing at the end. And so I'm grateful for the public for persevering with us to do that, and for our other staff for your helping to do that as well. I think there's some confusion that we can help remedy. There is still a lot of confusion about how much we spend on parks and Hart Park. An outrageous number was thrown out months ago about how much we spend on Hart Park. There's no way on the planet that we spend those real dollars on that park. There are costs. I'm just an old accountant, but there's overhead is prescribed and allocated to the park, and that's what inflates the cost of maintaining the park. We didn't spend anywhere near that much money actually maintaining that park. So when this process is done, those questions persist. They keep coming up. I think it would be helpful for us to give real dollars on, this is how much we spent mowing it, this is how much we spent watering it, this is how much we spent fertilizing it, trimming it. Those are the kind of things people want to know, and I think that's important to have. There's also some questions that persist about, there's some confusion, and it's not that we're hiding something, but we're not very good at explaining it. And that is, there's a great deal of confusion about, well, what effect do the golf courses have on the parks? And golf courses are enterprise funds. Parks are not enterprise funds. Enterprise funds means they have to make their own money to exist and to continue. So I think it would be helpful to the process for us to break those questions out. Mr. Lane asked some specific questions about that. Looking through his notes to us will give us, I think, some hints as to how to answer some of those financial questions. With regard to the RFP, I support us doing some kind of proposal to and entertain ideas about how to go about doing how to go about coming up with what our strategic plan will be. But I hope that we ask some specific questions of those that start to give us ideas. And one of them, it's fine, and I am grateful that people say, well, let's figure out ways to raise some money for the park. I'd like to put meat on the bones. What specifically, what opportunities are there, and who is interested in corporate sponsorships? Who's interested in being a concessionaire at the park? How much revenue will a concessionaire bring into us? When I'm in the park regularly, I see, for example, there are paddle boats being used in the bigger of the two lakes. Well, somebody's making money doing those paddle boats. We had to talk about food concessions, boat concessions, access to the river. One person was interested in doing river rafting, guided, safe rafting tours, but porting the boats, the rafts from the park itself. So putting meat to the bones about that kind of thing I think is important. And whether or not there are partnerships that could be put in place. So I hope we do that. I hope that's part of it. It isn't just what do we want the park to be, but I want real flesh and meat and bones flesh and meat on the bones about that. Next, I think it's important from my perspective to think of what the county owns along the river as a campus. And the campus begins upriver where the barbecue areas are near the end of the Kern River Golf Course. And as the river meanders down to Lake Ming, there's some space between the barbecue area and Lake Ming that it's our property. There's something we could do with it. Next, you go to where the lake is, the Lake Ming proper, and then to where the campgrounds are. But between the campgrounds and Calm is a substantial open space that could be developed and utilized for other purposes. And between the soccer park and the between the soccer park and Hart Park proper, where Alfred Harrell enters westbound the park, there's another large expanse of land there that something could be done. So I know there are differences of opinion about whether or not we should have, for example, some people specifically say, well, I'd like a water park. Other people say, no, I don't want a water park. I want it to be as pristine and natural as possible. Well, it depends on how old you are as to what recollections you have about what was good about Hart Park. If you're of a certain age, you liked it quiet. If you're of another age, you liked it with bumper cars. If you're of another age, you liked it with a water park. So it depends on what your era is as to what you think the park should be. But what I'm suggesting is we have a lot of land that we have not yet developed. And I'm interested in exploring how those undeveloped spots might become developed into something else that might become real amenities. And it might not be that the water park is in the park, it's the park proper, but it might be near the park, still on county property, that could still be, there's a plethora of options there. So I hope that's the kind of thing that we explore. But without belaboring this any longer, I support the process. I'd like us to go forward, and I'm grateful to everybody for your help in giving a new, the heart is beating stronger than it was just a few months ago at Hart Park. I want to close with one more thing I forgot to say. For those, I don't know how often some folks are in the park, but it is markedly, in markedly better shape today than it was when we sat down here and discussed whether or not there'd be a fee in the park. It is mowed, it is watered. There still are some areas that aren't greened up, but it is substantially in better shape than it was. And it's a better place for families to be using it because just it being trimmed and mowed makes it better. So I'm grateful, and I want to give props to Jeff or Mr. Hill and Mr. Alsop for making an effort to do that, because there was a long time as I would take my rest in the park, as I would ride from the east and west part of the park and cut through the park. There were many times you never saw any maintenance going on. And in the months that have passed now since we had our discussion about this, it is the regular case that I see maintenance people working in the park when I am there by the lake at my rest stop where I stop. So thank you for that. And I look forward to making the park something that we can all love and embrace again. And I also support the concerns that were expressed that this isn't the only park we're trying to fix up. There are lots of people all across Kern County who are the only recreation they have for their family and kids are our parks. So I want to make sure all of them are taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Mager. Do we have any other comments from members of the board? Supervisor Couch.
Thank you. Here's several thoughts in completely random order. First of all, thank you, Cheryl and Chris. After Vision 2020, this was you were the obvious choices for this, and it was probably easy for you after 13,000 people versus a couple of hundred. You handled that no problem. So, but thank you for your commitment and your willingness to do that. Wise choice, Mr. Alsop. I agree with Mrs. Bell. And something that's just kind of bugging me about this is we're in a fiscal crisis, and I know we don't have to hire any of these folks that submit any sort of RFQ, RFP, but we're going to. If they do that will ultimately happen. And I get that we have to have a vision, we have to have a plan, but let me just talk a little bit about. I have more confidence, I think, in General Services staff to be able to do this. General Services staff has created a master plan for Buena Vista, and we've prioritized projects there, and you are pursuing grants, and we might not get to do our top priority if we get a grant for what's our number 5 choice, but we'll do number 5, and we'll continue to work on the others. And we recently did, now that's a much larger facility and much more active facility, but we recently went through a very similar process in Fraser Mountain Park. We got the community together 4 or 5 times. One of your personnel, I've forgotten his name, sort of the master park planner. You've forgotten his name as well. Okay. Don, that's it. He put together a plan for the park, and we prioritized those, got back together with the community. My point is your department did all that. I'm not chastising anyone for the idea of going out for an RFQ, RFP. I just look at whatever it's going to cost us and being in the financial crunch that we're in and really thinking maybe we ought to give General Services a shot. Because of my experience with General Services, they've been able to do that on a much larger scale and on a much smaller scale. To my knowledge, and I asked this question recently, we have 4 full-time maintenance people and 2 part-time people dedicated to Hart Park. Is that close?
Yes, that's close.
Okay. What I'm concerned about is spending money on a plan that will give us a list of projects that even if we were to go build the projects, I don't think we have an adequate amount of people to actually do proper maintenance on the park as it is. And adding projects and adding elements that would require more maintenance will just put a further burden on those same folks. And I'm going to bring it up again, and I'm going to bring it up more strongly each time this comes up. But when Bob LaRude was here, and he was our director of parks, he once said that Buena Vista Aquatic Recreation Area brought in about 60% of the revenues to the entire parks department. And it's very easy to go to our website, and it's very easy to go to Buena Vista Aquatic Recreation Area and look at all the fees. You can't get into that place for less than $7. I think we ought to face the reality that a parking fee of some kind, maybe not every single day, and maybe there are different categories, some for seniors, some for whomever, is probably an inevitability. And we ought to look at it as a revenue stream that could be used to enhance the park, not as some sort of punitive thing that we're imposing on people. It's simply something that people that use the park would pay, just as they do at Buena Vista. And I don't think we ought to do this, but it's somewhere along the lines of Mr. Lane. At least I'm not ready to do this yet. I need to think about this more. But if we looked at our parks as more of an enterprise fund, and in order to do that, we have to look at the revenues that they generate. We have to look at the exact expenses that they require and see what it would take in the way of general fund contributions to make that up or additional revenue streams to fill that gap. I'd like to see that analysis. And I really don't want us to go do the RFQ, RFP yet until we've given General Services staff a shot at this. I recognize I may be in the minority about that, but I wanted to voice that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any other comments? Okay, I know we had a motion to receive and file. Did we get a second from Supervisor Maggard? Okay, please cast your votes.
The motion is approved, 4 ayes, 1 absent. Supervisor Perez.
Thank you. And that brings us to the conclusion of our agenda. And our next meeting is Tuesday, October 10th at 9 a.m. And so I'd ask that we adjourn our meeting in memory of former Kern County Supervisor Don Mabin, who passed away this morning. Thank you very much. We are adjourned.